You're sitting in a room, surrounded by the hum of machinery, the soft flicker of lights. It feels real, doesn't it? The cool surface beneath your fingertips, the rhythmic pulse of your breath. But what if it isn't? What if everything around you, your thoughts, your sensations, were merely projections, a simulated reality? This is the crux of the simulation hypothesis, the idea that the world you experience isn't the base reality at all. It's a simulation created by some higher intelligence, a computer running an elaborate program that simulates everything you know, time, space, even consciousness itself. All of it, just data. Imagine then that everything you've ever experienced, the soft breeze, the sound of your heartbeat, the taste of your favorite food, has been carefully constructed, not by nature, but by code, algorithms, and artificial constructs. The trees you see outside, perhaps they don't exist at all, except as a digital recreation, created to be perceived by you. In this world, you might be nothing more than a set of instructions, a sequence of ones and zeros wrapped in a biological shell. You think you are you, but in truth, your identity is simply an illusion, crafted by a simulation that cannot truly be touched, only experienced through your senses. The real you is somewhere, outside the program, in a world you can never reach. Consider for a moment the possibility that every time you blink, every time you turn your head, you are simply re-rendering your perception of the world. Each moment, in this view, is not happening as you experience it, but is instead an instantaneous recreation of everything that ever was, created anew just for you. If we accept this idea, we're forced to ask, what is the nature of our consciousness? Are we aware of the truth of our own creation? Or are we so immersed in the simulation that we've lost all awareness of the world outside? Perhaps our minds are simply programmed to perceive what is necessary to navigate the world, to live, to survive. The most haunting aspect of the simulation hypothesis is its implications for free will. If everything is scripted, every action and thought predetermined by the system running the simulation, what room is there for choice? You may feel as if you are making decisions, but what if those decisions are only the result of a complex algorithm, a series of probabilities that converge upon the actions you take? And yet, there are cracks in the simulation. Perhaps the glitches are too subtle to notice during the day-to-day. A strange coincidence, a flickering of lights, the briefest moment of déjà vu, a sense that something is wrong, but not enough to prove it. Could these be signs that the simulation is failing, that the layers are thinning, and reality is about to expose itself? This possibility, unsettling as it may seem, has been gaining ground in both scientific and philosophical circles. If advanced civilizations can create simulations of their own, simulations that are indistinguishable from real life, then why shouldn't we ourselves be living in one? The idea is not purely theoretical. It's based on the potential for technology to reach a point where simulating consciousness becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed a thought experiment, known as the simulation argument. It suggests that at least one of the following must be true. Civilizations either never reach a level of technological advancement that allows for such simulations, they choose not to create them, or we are indeed living in a simulation right now. The odds, it seems, are tilted toward the last option. But if we are in a simulation, who's the programmer? Who is running the code? Is it another civilization, observing us as we observe the world around us? Or is it something far more abstract, an unknown force, an algorithmic process that is beyond human comprehension? The creators of this world, if they even exist, are so far removed from us that we may never understand their intentions or even their existence. Now, imagine stepping outside the simulation. The world you once thought was real dissolves into a static void. The rules you've known, gravity, time, light, cease to matter. You're no longer bound by the constraints of space. In the real world, whatever that may be, everything is different. The program you've lived in for so long has been peeled away, leaving you face to face with something far more unfathomable. If the simulation is indeed the truth, then perhaps the most pressing question isn't about the nature of the world outside, but about the world within. What does it mean to live, to experience, to perceive, when everything you know is based on a simulation? Are we reduced to mere simulations ourselves, existing only for the purposes of the program, or do we transcend the system, finding meaning in the moments we are given? This, in essence, is the paradox at the heart of the simulation hypothesis. If we are in a simulation, can we ever truly know what's real? Is our sense of reality merely an illusion, a construct of something we cannot touch, grasp, or understand? Or is there something more to our existence, something beyond the program, that gives meaning to our experiences? If we continue down this path, it becomes clear that the lines between reality and illusion blur more with every question asked. Each answer leads to new layers of complexity, more mysteries, more paradoxes. The truth may lie just beyond our reach, like a shimmering horizon, always receding as we approach. Are we simply the product of an experiment, a glitch in a vast simulation? Or are we more than that, more than the sum of our code? In the end, we may never know, but the question itself, whether we're living in a simulation, reveals something even deeper about the nature of human curiosity, our desire to understand and define the boundaries of existence. And so, we remain, caught in this web of thoughts and questions, not knowing if the answers lie within or beyond the code we've been given. But we live, we experience, and that in itself may be the most important truth of all. You float in a dark, silent space. You feel nothing, hear nothing. Yet, you are aware of your thoughts, aware of the world around you, or at least, what you believe is the world around you. But what if it's all an illusion? What if your senses deceive you? This is the premise of the brain in a vat thought experiment. Imagine, if you will, that your brain is detached from your body, suspended in a vat of life-sustaining liquid. The brain is connected to a computer that stimulates your mind, providing you with sensory experiences, as if you were still walking through the world, interacting with others, living your life. In this scenario, everything you see, feel, taste, and hear is nothing more than a set of artificial signals. The people around you, the trees swaying in the breeze, the warmth of the sun, all of it is just data being transmitted to your brain. There is no physical world, no body to walk through it, only the illusion of it all. But how could you ever know? How could you tell if the world you perceive is real, or just a sophisticated simulation designed to trick you? Your senses tell you that the world is real. Your mind has no reason to doubt it. Yet, the very foundation of your experience is based on nothing but illusion, a creation of a machine far beyond your understanding. This idea, though unsettling, poses a question about the nature of reality itself. If all of your experiences, your entire existence, can be reduced to nothing but electrical signals, can we ever truly know what's real? Are our perceptions just projections, fabricated by some higher intelligence, a mind floating in a vat of life? And what of the self? If your brain is no longer housed within your body, does that mean you are still the same person? Is your identity bound to the physical world, or is it a product of your mind, your consciousness, your thoughts? If your mind is separated from its physical form, does it still retain the essence of you, or does the mind become something else entirely? The more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. If all you are is a brain in a vat, disconnected from the world you perceive, how can you trust anything? How can you trust your senses, your thoughts, your memories? What if the very act of trusting is part of the illusion, a mechanism of the mind designed to keep you grounded in a false reality? Yet, this paradox leads to an intriguing conclusion. If you are indeed a brain in a vat, then everything you experience still feels real to you. The sensations, the emotions, the thoughts, they are still yours. They may not be based in physical reality, but they are still real in the sense that they exist within your consciousness. And so perhaps, reality is not about external facts, but about perception, about the way the mind experiences the world. This brings us to a deeper question. What is truth? If our senses are unreliable, If they only provide us with a filtered, fabricated version of the world, then what is truth but a construct of our minds? What if truth is not something objective, something out there waiting to be discovered, but something subjective, something that depends on the way our minds interact with the world? In a way, the brain in a vat scenario challenges our understanding of knowledge itself. If all we can know is what our minds tell us, and if our minds are manipulated by an external force, how can we ever claim to know anything with certainty? Are we simply trapped within our own minds, unable to escape the illusions they create? Philosophers have long debated this very idea. Descartes, for example, proposed that the only thing we can be sure of is our own existence, cogito, ergo sum. But what if even that is a lie? What if our very thoughts are not our own, but part of a larger, more intricate illusion? The brain in a vat reminds us that certainty is fleeting, that even our most basic assumptions about reality may be flawed. And so we come to a curious point. If we cannot trust our senses, if we cannot trust our minds, what is left? How do we navigate a world where everything we perceive could be fabricated, where the lines between reality and illusion blur until they are indistinguishable? Perhaps the answer lies not in seeking certainty, but in accepting the mystery itself, in embracing the unknown. The mind, it seems, is a powerful thing. It can create entire worlds, entire realities, out of nothing. But this power also makes it vulnerable, susceptible to deception, to manipulation. The brain in a vat invites us to question the very nature of our existence, to challenge the assumption that what we perceive is the whole truth. It asks us to wonder if the world is not what it seems. What does that say about us? The idea is both profound and unsettling. If we are trapped in a vat, if our minds are held captive by some greater force, then what does freedom mean? Are we free to make choices, to shape our lives, if everything is controlled by an external force? Or is freedom itself just another illusion, a fleeting fantasy created to keep us content within the confines of the simulation? And yet, even if we are nothing more than brains in vats, does that make our experiences any less meaningful? After all, the feelings you have, the moments of joy, of pain, of love, they are real to you. They exist within the confines of your mind, and in that sense they are as real as anything else. The brain in a vat hypothesis reminds us that reality, at its core, is a matter of perception. What then is the purpose of this strange existence, if we cannot know the world as it truly is? If all we have are our perceptions, what meaning can we find? Perhaps meaning is not found in the world around us, but in the way we experience it, in the thoughts we have, the emotions we feel, the choices we make. Even in a simulated world, we can find purpose, if only we look within. In the end, the brain in a vat thought experiment doesn't give us answers. It doesn't provide us with a neat, tidy solution. Instead, it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, the fragility of our perceptions. It reminds us that the truth may always remain just out of reach, and that perhaps the search for it is more important than the truth itself. Deep in the darkness of a cave, prisoners sit, bound and fixed in place. They have been there for as long as they can remember, their bodies motionless, their heads turned toward a wall. Behind them, a fire burns, casting long shadows across the cave's cold stone surface. But the prisoners do not know this. All they can see are the shadows of objects that pass in front of the fire, projected onto the wall before them. The shadows dance, flicker, and move, but the prisoners are unaware of the true source of these images. They believe the shadows are reality, for they have never seen anything else. This is the essence of Plato's allegory of the cave. A metaphor for human perception, it asks us to question what we believe is real. Are we like those prisoners, limited by our senses, trapped in the dark, and convinced that the shadows we see on the wall are all there is to the world? Imagine the moment when one prisoner is freed, when they are untied and allowed to turn around. They are stunned, blinded by the light of the fire. For the first time, they see the source of the shadows, the objects that cast them. The prisoners thought they understood reality, but now they realize they've been living in a distorted, incomplete version of it. At first, the freed prisoner is overwhelmed. The light is too much, too intense. The shadows on the wall seem so much easier to understand, to accept. In the darkness there was comfort, there was certainty, but now, in the light, there is confusion, there is pain, there is a new world to comprehend, a new way of seeing. But as the freed prisoner's eyes adjust, they begin to understand. The objects casting the shadows are not the reality. They are mere representations, pale imitations of the true form of things. The light reveals the world as it truly is, not as the shadows on the wall made it seem. The prisoner sees the world in its richness, its depth, its fullness. This revelation is profound. The prisoner understands that their entire life, their entire understanding of the world, was based on illusions. The shadows were just shadows, reflections of something much greater, much more complex. And so the freed prisoner begins to walk, to explore, to experience the world beyond the cave. The truth, once glimpsed, becomes a path. But here's the catch: when the freed prisoner returns to the cave, to the other prisoners still chained and watching the shadows, they cannot comprehend what has changed. The light, the truth, is too much for them. The prisoners are still bound to the shadows, still convinced that what they see is all there is. They reject the freed prisoner's knowledge, mocking the very idea that the shadows could be anything less than reality. In this allegory, Plato speaks not just of sight, but of knowledge itself. What if the world we see is only a fraction of what is real? What if our understanding of existence is like the shadows on the cave wall, distorted, incomplete, and perhaps fundamentally wrong? The allegory of the cave forces us to confront the possibility that there may be truths beyond our perception. Plato's allegory also explores the struggle between knowledge and ignorance. The prisoners, comfortable in their understanding, fear the unknown. They fear the light that would reveal the truth. And in their fear they resist change. They cling to the shadows, to the familiar, even as they prevent themselves from experiencing the fullness of life. In this way, the cave becomes a symbol for human ignorance. We are all in some ways prisoners in our own minds. We are limited by our senses, our culture, our experiences. We see the world only through the narrow lens of our perceptions, and we build our understanding of reality from that limited view. But the truth is far greater than we can imagine. Consider how we too live with shadows. We believe in the certainty of what we see, in the solid nature of what we touch. But how much of that is an illusion? How much of what we know about the world is just a reflection, a distortion of something deeper, something we cannot yet grasp? The cave, in its darkness, becomes a metaphor for our own limited understanding. What if we are not just prisoners of sight, but prisoners of mind? What if the chains that bind us are the very thoughts and beliefs that we hold, the assumptions we make about the world, the boundaries we place on what is possible? How much of what we take for granted is just another shadow on the wall, waiting to be questioned, to be seen differently? The allegory of the cave invites us to ask, what are we missing? What truths have we yet to discover? What lies just beyond our reach, hidden in the light, waiting for us to look beyond the shadows and into the world of true knowledge? What would happen if we dared to step outside of our own caves, to question everything we've been taught, everything we think we know? And perhaps most profoundly, the allegory asks us about the nature of reality itself. How much of what we see is simply a projection, a reflection of a deeper truth? How much of the world is filtered through our perceptions, distorted by our senses, and how much of it lies beyond, waiting to be understood? If we are all prisoners of our own minds, can we ever break free? Can we ever see the world as it truly is? The freed prisoner's journey is not just about discovering the truth, it is about the transformation of the self. The truth changes us. It forces us to see the world differently, to think differently, to understand our place in the universe differently. It challenges everything we once believed, and in that challenge, there is growth, there is enlightenment, and there is freedom. But the journey is not easy. To leave the cave, to step into the light, is to embrace discomfort, confusion, and doubt. It is to abandon the comfort of the shadows for the unknown, for the possibility of a deeper, richer existence. It is to risk everything for the sake of truth, and yet, in the end, it is the only path to true knowledge. The allegory of the cave, then, is not just a story about light and darkness. It is a profound meditation on perception, knowledge, and the nature of reality. It reminds us that the world we see is not always the world that is. It encourages us to look beyond the surface, to seek out the deeper truths that lie hidden just beyond the shadows. You close your eyes, and for a moment, everything disappears. The world you once knew, the objects that surrounded you, vanish into nothingness. Now, what if I told you that the very act of closing your eyes means that the world ceases to exist at all? At least in a way, that's what Berkeley believed. George Berkeley, an 18th century philosopher, proposed a radical idea. He argued that objects do not exist independently of our perception of them. Instead, they exist only as we perceive them. Without perception, they simply do not exist. This idea is known as Berkeley's idealism, and it challenges the very foundation of how we think about reality. In Berkeley's view, the world is nothing more than a series of ideas in the mind. Everything we see, touch, taste, and hear is just a perception in our consciousness. Trees, mountains, the sky, even people, all are simply ideas that exist in the mind of the observer. They don't exist outside of our perception. To exist is to be perceived. But what about the world we experience when we're not looking at it? The world, it seems, continues to exist even when we're not observing it. For Berkeley, this isn't a problem. He argued that the existence of the world relies not on human perception, but on the perception of a higher mind, a divine mind, that of God. God, for Berkeley, is the ultimate perceiver, and everything in the world exists because God perceives it. The idea is a little unsettling at first. What does it mean if the reality we experience is just a series of ideas in our minds? How can something be real if it only exists when we perceive it? Berkeley's answer is that reality is real, not because it is physically there, but because it exists in the mind. To exist is to be perceived by someone, whether that someone is us or a greater consciousness. Berkeley's idealism flips the way we think about the world. We are so accustomed to believing that things exist independently of our minds that they would continue to exist whether or not we perceive them. But Berkeley suggests that the very concept of existence is inseparable from perception. Without perception, there is no reality. Imagine a forest, silent and empty, where no one is around to hear the rustling leaves. For Berkeley, this forest doesn't truly exist, at least not in the way we usually think about existence. The rustling of the leaves is not something that happens on its own. It is something that exists in the mind of the observer. Without an observer, there are no leaves, no sound, no forest. But Berkeley's idealism doesn't stop there. If all that exists is perception, then it leads us to ask, what is the nature of those perceptions? Are they all simply ideas in our minds, fleeting and subjective? Or is there something more to it, a deeper, more coherent reality that unites our perceptions, giving us a shared experience of the world? The world, according to Berkeley, is a vast network of interconnected ideas. Our perceptions may differ, but they are part of a greater whole, an ordered, coherent reality that is maintained by God. It is not random, nor is it chaotic. The world is a structured collection of ideas, always in relation to one another, even if we cannot always see how they fit together. This raises another question. If reality is a collection of ideas in the mind, can we ever truly know anything outside of ourselves? Is reality simply a reflection of our own minds, or is there something more? Berkeley believed that the structure of the world is ultimately grounded in the mind of God, and that our perceptions, though subjective, are not arbitrary. They are shaped by a divine order, a coherence that we cannot always understand, but can always trust. The implications of Berkeley's idealism are profound. If the world is only what we perceive, then what does it mean to be real? Does a tree exist only when we look at it? Does a star only exist when we see it twinkling in the sky? For Berkeley, these things exist, but only because they are perceived, either by us or by God. Reality, then, is a perpetual act of perception. But this view also forces us to reconsider what we mean by truth. If all that exists is perception, then truth cannot be an objective, external fact. Truth is simply the consistency of perception, the coherence of the ideas we experience. In a way, Berkeley's idealism suggests that reality is a collective agreement, a shared experience created by the perceptions of all minds, divine or human. And yet the notion that reality is an idea in the mind is both liberating and limiting. It suggests that we are not passive observers of the world, but active participants in its creation. Our perceptions shape the world, but we also shape each other's perceptions. Reality is not something that happens to us, it is something we participate in, something we create together. But even as we create this shared reality, we are still bound by the limits of our perceptions. We cannot see the world as it truly is, only as it appears to us. And because our perceptions are shaped by our own minds, we can never fully escape the subjective nature of our experience. We are always within the world we create, seeing it through the lens of our own consciousness. This idea might make you pause. If everything we perceive is just an idea in our minds, what does that say about the nature of existence? Are we all just living in our own heads, experiencing different versions of the world, connected only by the fact that we share some of the same perceptions? And if reality is nothing but perception, how do we know what is true or what is real? Berkeley's idealism challenges us to reconsider the way we experience the world. It asks us to think about perception not as something passive, but as something active. We do not simply see the world as it is, we create it with our minds. And in doing so, we participate in a greater divine order that holds everything together. In the end, Berkeley's philosophy leaves us with a profound question. If reality exists only as we perceive it, then what does it mean to truly know something? What is the difference between perception and reality? And if everything we experience is simply an idea in the mind, what does that say about the nature of existence itself? Perhaps the answer is simple. Reality is not something to be understood, but something to be experienced. Perception itself is the ultimate reality, and through it, we touch the divine order that sustains the world. Reality is a fluid, ever-changing dance of ideas, a continuous act of creation in the mind of God, and we too are part of that creation. You close your eyes, and in an instant, you are elsewhere. A different world unfolds before you, one filled with strange landscapes, people, and experiences. But as you drift deeper, you begin to wonder, how do you know this world is real? What if it's just a dream? This is the core of Descartes' dream argument, a question that shakes the very foundation of reality. Descartes, a French philosopher, pondered the nature of existence by considering whether our waking experiences could be distinguished from dreams. In a dream, everything seems real, doesn't it? The touch of a loved one, the taste of food, the feeling of the sun on your skin, all of it feels vivid and true until you wake up. But what if waking life is the same? What if, just like dreams, everything we experience, the sensations, the perceptions, the thoughts, is nothing more than a trick, a creation of our minds? Descartes proposed that there is no clear distinction between the waking world and the world of dreams. How can we be certain that what we perceive in our waking hours is not just another vivid dream? This leads to a deep question. Can we ever truly trust our senses? Our senses tell us that the world is solid, tangible, real. We see the sun rise and set. We feel the ground beneath our feet. We hear the sound of rain on the roof. But these same senses can deceive us, creating illusions, dreams within dreams. In a dream, everything appears to follow the rules of the world we know, but it can all unravel at any moment. Things shift, distort, and dissolve. But when we wake up, the dream fades, revealing the truth. Descartes asks, how do we know that our waking life won't dissolve in the same way, leaving us in the realization that it too was only a dream? If our senses can be so easily deceived in dreams, how can we trust them when we are awake? If everything we experience could simply be an illusion created by our mind, then how can we be certain of anything at all? Descartes' dream argument takes us to the edge of doubt, questioning the very reality we take for granted. In this state of doubt, Descartes turns inward. He begins with the one thing he knows for certain, that he is thinking. In the act of doubting, he confirms his own existence. Even if everything around him is a dream, he must exist to have the thought that everything might be a dream. I think, therefore I am, he declares. This is the foundation of his philosophy. But what about the world outside? What about the objects, the people, the laws of nature that seem to persist no matter how we feel? Descartes suggests that perhaps these things exist only because we perceive them. In a dream, the world appears solid and real, yet it is entirely constructed by the mind. Could it be that the same is true for our waking world? This raises another unsettling thought. If everything is simply a creation of our mind, how do we know it wasn't created by some higher intelligence, like a dreamer dreaming us into existence? Descartes, in his exploration of doubt, leaves open the possibility that an external force, whether a god or some other entity, could be responsible for creating the illusion of reality. But if all of this is just an illusion, what does that say about our perceptions of time, space, and causality? In a dream, time can stretch and compress, space can warp and bend. The laws of nature no longer hold true, and yet in the dream, they feel just as real as they do when we are awake. If the rules of the dream can so easily shift, why couldn't the same be true of the waking world? The more Descartes contemplates, the more the lines between dream and reality blur. Perhaps, he suggests, the very act of questioning reality is what brings us closer to the truth. After all, it is only through doubt that we come to understand what we can truly know. But what if the nature of reality is not something we can fully comprehend, even if we doubt everything? In the dream argument, Descartes ultimately leaves us with a sense of uncertainty. If the world could be a dream, how do we know it isn't? If we can't trust our senses, then what can we trust? The only certainty, it seems, is that we exist in some form, even if that existence is nothing more than a fleeting dream. This uncertainty can be unsettling, yet it also offers a sense of freedom. If reality is truly a dream, then perhaps it is not as fixed as we believe. Perhaps it is malleable, fluid, something we shape with our thoughts and perceptions. In a dream, we can be anyone, go anywhere, do anything. And in waking life, could it be that we have the same potential? The dream argument, in its simplicity, cuts to the heart of the human condition. It challenges us to question not only what we perceive, but how we perceive it. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to accept that we may never truly know the nature of reality. Perhaps, in the end, it is not about finding the answer, but about embracing the mystery of it all. And so, as you drift deeper into sleep, the boundary between dream and waking begins to blur. You may find yourself questioning whether you are truly awake, or if you are simply dreaming. The world around you, the sensations, the thoughts, the experiences may feel just as real as any dream, and yet you cannot be certain. For now the question lingers, is this real, or is this just another dream? And as you sink further into slumber, the answer may fade away, leaving only the soft rhythm of your breath, the quiet hum of the world, and the gentle sway of the dream you are about to enter. You stand at the edge of a vast, serene lake. The water reflects the sky above, calm and undisturbed. But as you gaze deeper, a thought occurs to you: is the lake truly there, or is it merely a reflection of your mind? What if the world we see isn't as it seems, but only what we perceive? This is the essence of phenomenalism, a philosophical view that challenges the idea of an objective reality existing independently of our perception. Phenomenalism suggests that objects do not exist in the way we traditionally think about them. Instead, they exist only as we perceive them, in the form of sensations, experiences, and perceptions. Imagine for a moment that the lake is not there at all when you turn away. It only exists in the moments when you are observing it. When you stop looking, the lake ceases to exist, vanishing into the shadows of the unknown. To exist, according to phenomenalism, is to be perceived, to be the object of experience. What if everything around you, every tree, every stone, every person, is merely a set of experiences, a collection of perceptions, flickering in and out of existence as you engage with them? The world, then, is not a fixed, objective reality. It is a series of phenomena, constantly shifting, emerging only through your senses and dissolving when you are not aware of them. In this view, reality is not separate from us. It is bound to us. It is the product of our perceptions, the result of our senses interacting with the world. The world is not out there, existing independently. It is in here, in our minds, constantly changing as we observe it, touch it, feel it. Objects exist only as long as we are conscious of them. Phenomenalism suggests that objects do not have inherent properties independent of our perception. The color of the lake, the texture of the stone, the weight of the air, these are not intrinsic qualities of the objects themselves. They are merely the way our senses interpret the world. The world exists as a collection of experiences, not as an external, unchanging reality. But here is where it gets interesting. Even if we can't know the world outside of our perceptions, even if objects only exist when we experience them, there still seems to be some order to the world. The lake does not shift its shape or color every time we blink. The world remains relatively stable, suggesting that perception is not just a random occurrence, but something more structured, more reliable. This leads to a delicate balance. Phenomenalism asks us to consider that while the world we perceive may not be real in the traditional sense, it is still something we can rely on, something that behaves in consistent, predictable ways. The laws of nature, the patterns of life, the movement of the stars, all of these seem to be constant, even though they are tied to our perception. But what does this mean for the nature of truth? If the world exists only as we experience it, then how do we know what is true? Can there be an objective truth, a truth that exists independently of our perception, or is all truth a matter of subjective experience? According to phenomenalism, truth is not something out there waiting to be discovered. It is something we create in our minds, through our perceptions and experiences. And yet this raises a deeper question. Is there a difference between the experiences we have and the reality we think we know? In the same way that a dream feels real when we're inside it, can the experiences we have of the world be trusted as a reflection of something outside our minds? Or is reality itself nothing more than a dream, fleeting and intangible? This view forces us to confront the nature of our existence. If the world is only what we perceive, then what are we, the perceivers? Are we the creators of reality, shaping it with our senses, our thoughts, and our beliefs? Or are we passive observers, trapped in a world that only exists because we are aware of it? Phenomenalism challenges us to question whether we are the masters of our own world or simply participants in an ongoing play of perceptions. The implications of phenomenalism extend beyond perception itself. If objects only exist when we perceive them, then the world becomes fluid, temporary, a construct that is continuously shaped and reshaped by the minds that interact with it. Nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent. The world is an ongoing dance of experience, a cycle of creation and dissolution. This idea can be liberating. If reality is not fixed, but instead malleable, then perhaps we have more control over it than we think. We shape the world with our perception. We create it as we experience it, moment by moment. The world is not something outside of us, something to be understood or conquered. It is something to be engaged with, shaped by the way we see it, and yet there is a quiet sadness in this view. If reality is a product of our perception, does it lose some of its meaning? Does the lake lose its majesty when we realize that it only exists because we are looking at it? Does the world lose its depth when we see it as a mere reflection, a shadow of something more? Phenomenalism forces us to confront the fragility of reality, its evanescence, but perhaps it is this very fragility that makes the world so precious. If reality is not permanent, if it is constantly shifting with each perception, then the moments we experience it become all the more meaningful. The beauty of the lake, the quiet of the night, the warmth of the sun, they are fleeting, yes, but they are real in the moment we experience them. So the question becomes, what is real? If reality is not independent of us, but exists only in our minds, then perhaps the real question is not whether the world is fixed, but how we choose to experience it. Reality is not something we need to understand in absolute terms. It is something we experience, something we live. The world, as phenomenalism suggests, is a canvas for our senses. It is an ever-changing painting, constantly shifting, created by the mind in every moment. There is no fixed reality, no permanent truth. There is only experience, perception, the dance of awareness and existence. Reality is a world of phenomena, always in flux, always evolving as we interact with it. In this view, reality is not an external world, but an internal experience. We are the creators of the world we know, and in that creation, we are free. The lake exists as we perceive it, the trees stand as we see them, and the sun sets as we witness it. The world is a reflection of our minds, and in that reflection, we find our place in the universe. Imagine you are holding a map. The lines, the markings, the contours, they all represent something real, something out there in the world. But what happens when you step away from the map and look at the world itself? The map, despite its accuracy, is not the world. It is merely a representation. This is the core of the map territory problem, a philosophical idea that challenges the relationship between symbols and reality. The map is a model, a reflection of the territory it aims to describe, but it can never be the territory itself. No matter how detailed, no matter how precise, the map will always be limited, a mere imitation of something far more complex. The world is vast, chaotic, and rich with detail, but the map, no matter how intricate, can only capture a fraction of that complexity. It simplifies, condenses, and abstracts the world into symbols, lines, and shapes. But the map is never the thing itself. It's always a representation, an interpretation of reality, not reality itself. In this view, the map is a tool, a way of understanding the world, but it can never capture its full depth. We use maps to navigate, to make sense of the vastness around us, but the map itself is always limited. It offers a glimpse, but it can never replace the world it attempts to depict. What does this mean for our perception of reality? If we consider all the symbols, all the language, all the concepts we use to describe the world, are they not just maps? Our ideas of the world, our theories, our beliefs, they are all representations, models we create to make sense of the world. But just as the map is not the territory, these ideas are not the reality they attempt to describe. The map territory problem forces us to confront the limitations of language and thought. We construct models of the world, but those models are always incomplete. We create concepts, ideas, and beliefs to navigate our existence, but they can never fully capture the complexity of the world itself. They are representations, not truths. Even when we try to represent the world with the greatest precision, we cannot escape this gap. A map that perfectly mirrors every detail of the territory would still be just a map. The very act of creating a map is an act of abstraction, a process of simplification. No matter how much information we include, the map is not the thing itself. This problem extends beyond maps. We use language to describe the world, to express our thoughts, to communicate. But language too is just a map. Words are symbols that represent concepts, but they are not the concepts themselves. In trying to describe reality, we are constantly translating it into a language that cannot fully capture its essence. Think about it. When we speak of a tree, we use a word, a symbol, to represent it. But the word tree is not the tree. It is only a tool for communicating an idea about the tree. The same is true for everything we describe. The language we use is always one step removed from the reality it aims to represent. This raises a question: if all we have are maps, symbols, and abstractions, can we ever truly know the territory? Can we ever truly experience the world as it is, without the filter of our perceptions, our concepts, and our language? If the map is not the territory, then what is left when we remove all the maps? In a way, this is the fundamental dilemma of human existence. We live in a world of representations, always perceiving the world through filters, through concepts, through the language we use to describe it. But these filters are not the world itself. They are only partial reflections, imperfect models of something far greater. Yet the map territory problem doesn't suggest that maps or symbols are useless. Quite the opposite. Maps are essential for navigating the world. They help us make sense of things, orient ourselves, and communicate with others. But we must always remember that the map is not the thing itself. It is a tool, not the reality it represents. This paradox lies at the heart of human understanding. We constantly create representations of the world, from maps to models to theories. And while these representations are useful, they are always incomplete. The map cannot be the territory. Our knowledge, our understanding of the world, is always partial, always limited, but perhaps that is the beauty of it. If the map is not the territory, then the territory remains infinite, unknowable, beyond our reach. The world is not something we can fully capture, fully comprehend, or fully understand. It is vast, mysterious, and always just beyond the limits of our perceptions, and yet we continue to map it. We continue to create models, to build frameworks for understanding. The map territory problem reminds us that these frameworks, these models, are essential, but they are never the final truth. The world is more than we can ever represent. It is a territory we can never fully map, a mystery that eludes our grasp. Perhaps, in the end, the greatest wisdom is to recognize that the map is not the territory, but it is still a map worth using. We may never fully know the world, but we can navigate it, explore it, and experience it through the maps we create. The map is not the reality, but it is the tool that allows us to engage with it. The map territory problem is a reminder that there is always more to reality than we can ever comprehend. No matter how sophisticated our maps, no matter how precise our models, the world will always be something more than we can represent. And in that recognition, there is both a humbling truth and a sense of wonder. You sit in a quiet room, gazing at a simple object, a cup perhaps, or a stone. You focus on its shape, its texture, its color. The object seems so solid, so real, but then a thought comes to mind: how do I know the object is truly as I perceive it? This is the problem of perception. It's a fundamental question that challenges the very nature of reality. We believe that what we see, hear, touch, and taste is an accurate reflection of the world around us, but is it? Are we really experiencing the world as it is? Or are we simply interpreting it through our senses, each perception shaped by the limitations of our mind? Our senses are often our primary connection to the world, yet they are far from perfect. The colors we see are not the same for everyone. What you perceive as red might not be the same shade of red that someone else perceives. Even the simple act of seeing is filled with assumptions, interpretations, and imperfections. But beyond the subjectivity of color, there's a deeper problem. When you look at an object, you don't see it directly. What you see is a series of signals sent to your brain by your eyes, processed and interpreted by your mind. In a sense, your mind is creating the object, not merely receiving it. But if the object is only a product of your perception, can you ever truly know what it is in itself? Take a moment to consider this. Everything you know about the world comes through the filter of your perception. The texture of the stone you hold in your hand, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, these experiences are not the world itself, but your mind's interpretation of it. The problem of perception lies in the gap between what is out there and how we experience it. This gap creates a puzzle. If we cannot know the world except through our senses, how can we be certain that what we experience is the truth? Are we living in an illusion, seeing only the world as it appears to us and never as it truly is? Is there a world beyond our perception that we can never access? Consider the idea that the world itself is not a fixed, unchanging reality, but a construct of your mind. Just as a dream shapes itself around your thoughts, perceptions, and desires, perhaps the waking world shapes itself around your senses. What you experience is a result of how your mind processes the raw data it receives, a continuous creation of the world as you know it. This leads us to ask, if our senses are the only connection we have to the world, and those senses are inherently flawed and subjective, can we ever trust our experiences? Every perception, every moment of seeing, hearing, or feeling is tinged with the limitations of our mind. And in this, perception becomes not a window to the truth, but a filter that shapes it. Philosophers have long wrestled with the problem of perception. Some argue that we can never truly know the world as it is. We are bound by the limitations of our senses, and all we can ever know is how the world appears to us. Others suggest that while our perceptions are limited, they still give us a reliable, though incomplete, picture of the world around us. But what about when our perceptions deceive us? We know that illusions exist when we see objects that aren't there, or when we hear sounds that aren't real. Our senses can be tricked, and our minds can create false experiences. In these moments, the world we perceive becomes even more distant from the world that truly is. Even in our everyday experiences, our perceptions can be clouded by our emotions, our expectations, and our previous knowledge. The way we see the world is influenced not just by the raw data our senses collect, but by the mental frameworks we already carry. The world is filtered through our mind, colored by our thoughts and beliefs. This brings us to another question. If perception is not an objective process, then what does it mean to know something? Can knowledge be objective, or is it always subjective, shaped by the mind's interpretations and limitations? If our understanding of the world is always mediated by perception, how can we ever truly know anything outside of ourselves? Yet despite these uncertainties, we continue to trust our perceptions. We walk through the world as if the ground beneath our feet is solid, as if the objects we see are truly there. We rely on our senses to navigate, to communicate, to make sense of the world. And in doing so, we continue to live as though our perceptions are accurate reflections of reality. But perhaps that's the paradox. We know on some level that our perceptions are not perfect. We know that we cannot fully trust them, and yet we rely on them every day. The problem of perception doesn't just show us the limits of our senses, it highlights our reliance on them, despite their imperfections. In a way, this problem opens up a deeper question about the nature of existence itself. If we cannot trust our perceptions, then what is reality? Is reality something objective, something that exists independently of us? Or is it something that is created by our perceptions, a constantly shifting construct, always dependent on the mind that experiences it? We might never fully resolve the problem of perception, but in recognizing it, we can begin to understand our relationship with the world. We are not passive observers, but active participants in the creation of reality. Every moment of perception is an act of creation, a shaping of the world around us. In the end, the problem of perception invites us to question not only what we know but how we know it. It reminds us that our understanding of the world is always mediated by our senses and that those senses are inherently flawed. But it also invites us to see the beauty in this, in the mystery of perception and the endless journey of discovery that it offers. Perhaps in the quiet of the night, as you drift closer to sleep, you will begin to wonder about the world beyond your perception. What is real, and what is simply a creation of your mind? And as the thoughts fade into the distance, you may find comfort in the uncertainty, in the gentle unfolding of reality, piece by piece. You open your eyes to a world filled with color, sound, and sensation. The room you're in seems so real, its walls, the furniture, the soft light spilling through the window. You can feel the warmth of the sunlight on your skin, hear the distant hum of the world outside. But what if all of this is not directly in front of you? This is the heart of indirect realism, a philosophical perspective that suggests the world we experience is not the world itself, but a representation, an interpretation of something far more complex. Our senses take in data from the world, but they do not present it to us as it is. Instead, they deliver a mediated version. Imagine, if you will, that what you see before you, the room, the objects, the light, is not what is actually out there. What you experience is a mental construct, a picture created in your mind based on sensory information. The world we perceive is not the world itself, but a version of it, shaped by our mind's interpretation of sensory data. In this view, objects don't directly present themselves to us. Instead, we experience their qualities, color, texture, sound, and shape through the filter of our senses. The world is not directly accessible. It must first pass through the lens of our perception. The sensation of the room, the warmth, the color of the walls, is all constructed by our mind based on sensory input. This challenges the idea of direct realism, which claims that we experience the world as it truly is, without any mediation. Indirect realism, however, tells us that our senses act as intermediaries, relaying information about the world to our minds. They do not give us the world in its raw form, but a version of it that is colored by the nature of our perception. Think about the way you perceive a tree. What you experience, the color, the shape, the texture, is not the tree itself. You are experiencing the tree as it is reflected and processed by your senses. The tree in itself is something separate, existing beyond your immediate perception, and what you perceive is merely a representation of that reality. This process of mediation raises a question: how can we be sure that what we perceive corresponds to the world as it truly is? If our senses are the only means by which we interact with the world, and those senses are limited and subjective, how do we know we are perceiving the world accurately? Could we be experiencing a distorted version of reality, shaped by our senses, rather than the world as it is? Indirection in perception means we are never in direct contact with the world. We interact with representations of the world, images, sounds, sensations, but the world itself remains beyond our immediate grasp. Our senses build a bridge between us and the world, but that bridge may never truly carry us to the truth. What we experience is only a map of the territory, never the territory itself. But this doesn't mean that our perception is without value. Indirect realism does not suggest that the world is entirely beyond our reach, but that our experience of it is mediated by our minds. We can trust our perceptions to an extent, but we must acknowledge that they are not infallible. Our senses offer us a version of reality, one that is useful, but not absolute. This idea calls into question the nature of knowledge itself. If what we experience is always mediated by perception, then how can we ever know anything with certainty? If we cannot directly access the world, then our understanding of it must always be an approximation, a model of reality that we must continually refine and question. But indirect realism also gives us a fascinating perspective on the nature of experience. The world we perceive is not something static, fixed in place, but a dynamic interplay of sensory data and mental processing. The colors, sounds, and textures we experience are the result of this ongoing interaction. In a sense, we are constantly co-creating our experience of the world with our senses and our mind. This raises a deeper question. If the world is always mediated by perception, then can we ever know the world as it truly is? Is the reality out there a mystery, forever beyond our reach, always filtered through the lens of our senses? Indirect realism suggests that while we may never fully grasp the true nature of the world, we can still engage with it, navigate it, and make sense of it through our perceptions. In this way, perception becomes a kind of art. We are constantly interpreting the world, shaping it, and making it our own. Every sensation we experience, every sight, sound, touch, is an interpretation, a creative act of the mind. And through this act, we come to know the world, even if that knowledge is always indirect. Yet there's a quiet humility in this view. If we are always interpreting the world through our senses, then we must accept that our knowledge is inherently limited. No matter how much we study the world, no matter how finely we tune our instruments of perception, we will never be able to see the world in its entirety. Our understanding is always partial, always mediated, but even with these limitations, the world remains open to us. We may never see the raw world, but we experience it through a richness of perception. The colors we see, the sounds we hear, the shapes we touch, they are the world we know, and they shape our lives. Indirect realism, rather than diminishing our experience, invites us to appreciate the complexity and depth of our perceptions. In the end, indirect realism reminds us that perception is not just a passive act, but an active one. We are constantly engaged with the world, constantly interpreting it, constructing it in our minds. Reality is not something we passively observe, but something we actively create, mediated through our senses, shaped by our perceptions. As you relax and drift deeper into thought, let the idea of mediated reality settle into your mind. The world is never as we directly experience it, and yet it is always present, waiting for us to engage with it. What we see, feel, and hear is a reflection of a world we cannot directly touch, but in that reflection, we find our place within it. You open your eyes to the world around you. The sunlight filters through the window, casting soft shadows across the floor. The walls are sturdy, the objects in the room familiar. You know what you see, you trust your senses. The world is exactly as it appears to be, or is it? This is the belief at the heart of naive realism. According to naive realism, the world we experience is exactly as it is. What we see, hear, touch, and feel is a direct reflection of the world outside of us. There is no filter, no distortion. The world is simply what our senses show us, nothing more. In this view, when you look at a tree, the tree you see is the tree as it truly is. The color, the shape, the texture, they all belong to the tree itself, not to your mind's interpretation. Your senses are accurate, and they present the world to you as it truly exists, without any interference from the mind. Naive realism suggests a simplicity and clarity. The world around you is stable, unchanging, and direct. You experience it as it is, and there is no need for interpretation, no need for layers of mediation. The objects you encounter are real in the most direct sense. What you see is what is there. But this belief is challenged by the subtle complexities of perception. Consider for a moment that the color you see in the world is not the color that objectively exists in the world. Color is not a property of the object itself. It is the result of how your eyes process light, how your brain interprets wavelengths. The object's color is an illusion, shaped by your perception. If color is not inherent in objects, then what else might be? Shape, texture, sound. Each of these qualities exists only as your senses interpret them. A sound is not simply a sound. It is a vibration that your ears process, a signal that your brain decodes. What you perceive as a sound is only a reflection of these physical processes. Suddenly, the clarity of naive realism begins to crack. The world you see is not as simple as it seemed. What you experience is not a direct reflection of reality, but a version of it, shaped by your senses and the way your brain processes sensory information. What you see is not the world itself, but an interpretation of it. And then there is the mind. If your senses are only presenting an interpretation of reality, then how much of what you experience is shaped by your mind? Every perception, every sensation is processed by your brain, filtered through the lens of your consciousness. The world, in a sense, is something you actively create with your mind, not something that is simply out there. As you look deeper into the collapse of naive realism, you begin to question everything you thought you knew about the world. What is the nature of reality if we are never truly experiencing it directly? How can we trust our senses if they only give us an interpretation, a constructed version of the world? What is real if perception is so fragile, so malleable? Naive realism assumes that objects exist independently of our perception of them, that they have an essence that remains unchanged, whether or not anyone is looking at them. But if we cannot directly experience the world, how can we be certain of this? Perhaps the world we see is not fixed, but contingent on our perception, constantly shifting and reshaping itself in the act of observation. The collapse of naive realism opens up a world of uncertainty. If we cannot be certain that our perceptions are a true reflection of the world, how do we navigate our existence? If what we see, feel, and hear is only an interpretation, how do we trust what we know? The world begins to blur, and with it, our sense of reality. Perhaps then, the very idea of direct experience is an illusion. Perhaps we are always in a state of mediation, always filtering the world through our senses, our thoughts, and our memories. What we call reality is never truly experienced, but always a construct, always a representation of something that is just out of reach. Yet there is a beauty in this uncertainty. The collapse of naive realism forces us to confront the limits of our perception, but it also invites us to embrace the mystery of existence. If the world is not as fixed as we thought, then maybe it is more fluid, more open to interpretation. Perhaps reality is something we co-create, not something we passively observe. In this view, reality is not an external static thing. It is a dance between our senses and our mind, between the world we perceive and the mind that interprets it. What we experience is not a direct reflection of the world, but an ongoing process of interaction, a negotiation between what is out there and what is in here. The collapse of naive realism, then, does not leave us in a state of despair. It offers us the opportunity to explore the world with a new perspective. We no longer see the world as something fixed and unchanging, but as something dynamic, something we engage with and shape through our perceptions, our thoughts, and our consciousness. This shift in perspective allows us to see the world in all its complexity. Reality is no longer something we passively accept, but something we actively participate in. Our perceptions may be imperfect, but they are also a gateway to understanding, a way to explore the world's depth, its richness, and its mystery. And so the collapse of naive realism opens up a space for deeper inquiry, for a more nuanced relationship with the world. We begin to see that the world is not something we can simply know in a direct way. It is something we must engage with, something we must interpret, something we must experience with all of our senses and our mind. You look at the world around you, a quiet room bathed in soft light. Every object seems familiar, each surface, each corner, a part of the world you know. But what if this world, as you experience it, is not the world itself? What if there's something beyond your perception, something hidden from view? This is the essence of Kant's noumenal versus phenomenal distinction. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, proposed that there is a fundamental difference between the world as we perceive it and the world as it truly is. The world we experience, he argues, is only a fraction of reality, a filtered, constructed version of something much deeper and unknowable. Kant's philosophy divides reality into two realms, the phenomenal and the noumenal. The phenomenal world is the world of appearances, the world we experience through our senses. It is the world of perception, where objects seem to have properties, colors, shapes, sounds. This is the reality we interact with every day, the reality we feel, touch, and see. But the noumenal world, according to Kant, lies beyond our perception. It is the world as it truly is, independent of our senses and our minds. This realm is not accessible to us. We cannot see it, hear it, or touch it, because our perception is limited to the phenomenal. The noumenal is something beyond our grasp, something we can never directly experience. This distinction raises a deep question. If we can never experience the noumenal world, how can we know it exists? How can we be certain that there is a reality beyond our perception? Kant's answer is that while we cannot know the noumenal directly, we can infer its existence. The very act of perception, the very structure of our experience, suggests that there is something beyond it, something that makes the phenomenal world possible. Kant believed that our minds play an active role in shaping the world we experience. The phenomenal world is not simply given to us, as it is. It is constructed by our senses, which organize and interpret the raw data they receive. Space, time, causality, these are not inherent qualities of the objects we see. They are categories of the mind, ways in which we organize our experience. But this leaves us with a paradox. If the phenomenal world is a product of our minds, how can we trust it to reflect the noumenal world accurately? After all, the way we perceive the world is not the way it truly is. It is filtered through our senses and shaped by our cognitive structures. The phenomenal world is a representation, not the thing itself. Yet Kant suggests that while our perception may not be perfect, it is still reliable. Our senses give us a version of reality that allows us to navigate the world, to live and act within it. The categories our mind uses, space, time, causality, are necessary for us to make sense of the world, even though they may not correspond exactly to the way things are in the noumenal realm. In this view, the noumenal world is not something we can ever directly access or understand. It is a realm beyond human experience, beyond the limits of our senses, but that does not mean it is irrelevant. The noumenal world is the foundation of the phenomenal world. Without it, our perceptions would have no grounding, no basis in reality. Kant's distinction also challenges the very idea of objective knowledge. If we cannot access the noumenal world directly, then all knowledge is, in a sense, limited. We can never know things as they are in themselves, only as they appear to us. Our knowledge is always mediated by our senses, shaped by the categories of the mind. But this doesn't mean that our perception is meaningless. On the contrary, Kant argued that the phenomenal world is the only reality we can know, and it is still deeply meaningful. We interact with it, navigate it, and live within it. While we can never fully know the noumenal, we can live a rich and meaningful life within the bounds of our perception. This distinction invites us to rethink the very nature of reality. If we can never directly know the noumenal world, does that mean reality is ultimately unknowable? Kant suggests that reality is not something we can fully grasp, but that doesn't mean it is meaningless. Our perceptions, though limited, are still a valid way of engaging with the world. In this way, Kant's philosophy doesn't lead to despair. Instead, it offers a profound insight into the nature of human experience. We are not passive recipients of a fixed, unchanging reality. Instead, we actively construct our experience of the world, shaping it with our minds and our senses. Our knowledge may be partial, but it is still a meaningful reflection of the world we inhabit. At the same time, Kant's distinction reminds us of the limits of our understanding. The world we experience is not the world itself, but a representation of it. And though we can never access the noumenal directly, the very fact that we experience the phenomenal suggests that there is something beyond, something greater, that shapes our reality. Kant's noumenal versus phenomenal distinction forces us to confront the boundaries of human knowledge. It invites us to embrace the mystery of reality, to acknowledge that there is always more than meets the eye. While we may never fully understand the noumenal, we can still engage with the phenomenal world, finding meaning, beauty, and truth in the experience it offers. In the end, the distinction does not diminish reality. It deepens it, reminding us that what we experience is not all there is, but a glimpse of something greater. Reality is not static or fixed, but a dynamic interaction between our minds and the world around us, forever shaped by the limits of our perception. You sit quietly in a room, gazing at the world around you. The light falls softly through the window, casting shadows on the floor. Everything seems clear, vivid, real. But then, a thought drifts into your mind. What if everything you see is not the world itself, but a mere reflection, a shadow behind a veil? This is the concept of the veil of perception, a philosophical idea that suggests that our perception of the world is always filtered, always mediated by something beyond our control. What we experience, what we see is not the world as it truly is, but a version of it, shaped by our senses and minds. Imagine that every sensation you experience, every sight, sound, taste, and touch, is like a mist, a veil that separates you from the reality beyond. The light you see, the colors, the shapes, are not the things themselves, but merely their reflections, refracted through the lens of your senses. You are not in direct contact with the world, you are separated by this veil. The veil of perception suggests that our senses do not give us direct access to the world. Instead, they filter, distort, and transform the raw data they receive, presenting us with an image of reality that is shaped by our minds. What we perceive is always a construction, always a version of the world, never the world itself. Consider the colors you see in the world: red, blue, green. They are not properties of objects themselves, but the result of how your eyes interpret wavelengths of light. The color of the object is not in the object, but in your perception of it. In this way, your perception acts as a filter, a veil, between you and the world, but this veil extends beyond sight. All of our senses, taste, touch, hearing, are mediated by our mind, shaped by the way our brain processes sensory data. Every experience, every moment of perception is not a direct encounter with reality, but a mental reconstruction, a version of the world that has been filtered through our cognitive structures. This raises a fundamental question. If our perceptions are always mediated, can we ever know what the world is truly like? Can we ever experience the world without the veil of our senses, without the distortion of our minds? The veil of perception suggests that the world as it appears to us is always a projection, an interpretation, never the raw, unfiltered truth. Consider the idea that reality exists independently of our perception. The world continues to exist whether or not we are there to observe it. Yet for us, reality is always experienced through the veil. We can never know the world directly, but only through the lens of our perception. Our senses are not a window to reality, but a filter that shapes it. This problem leads to an interesting paradox. If we cannot experience the world directly, how can we know anything about it at all? Our knowledge of the world is always second-hand, always mediated by our senses and our interpretations. The veil prevents us from seeing the world as it truly is, yet it is through the veil that we live, navigate, and make sense of our existence. In a way, the veil of perception creates a distance between us and the world. We are never truly in direct contact with reality. Instead, we are always looking through the veil, seeing only a representation, a version of the world shaped by our minds. This distance can create a sense of separation, a feeling that we are never fully connected to the world around us. Yet, this distance does not necessarily diminish our experience. The veil may separate us from the world, but it also allows us to engage with it in meaningful ways. The veil shapes our perception, but it also gives us the ability to reflect, to interpret, to experience the world in complex and nuanced ways. Through the veil, we find meaning, connection, and understanding. The veil of perception challenges us to confront the limitations of our senses, but it also invites us to explore the richness of our experience. While we may never see the world as it truly is, we can still engage with it, navigate it, and find meaning in the way we perceive it. Our perceptions are not perfect, but they are still powerful. In this sense, the veil does not obscure the world entirely. It shapes the way we interact with reality, but it does not completely hide it. Through the veil, we can still find beauty, truth, and connection. The veil may limit our understanding, but it also opens up new possibilities for exploration and discovery. The veil of perception also raises questions about the nature of reality itself. If we can never directly access the world, then what is real? Is the world outside of us independent of our perception, or is it something we create in our minds? The veil invites us to reconsider the relationship between perception and reality, between what is and what we experience. Ultimately, the veil of perception forces us to accept that we can never fully know the world as it truly is. Our senses, though powerful, are always limited, always shaped by the veil. But this does not mean that our experience of the world is false or meaningless. It is simply an interpretation, a version of reality that we can navigate, explore, and understand. As you reflect on the veil of perception, it becomes clear that our experience of the world is always mediated, always shaped by our senses and our minds. The veil is not a barrier to understanding, but a part of how we engage with the world. Through it, we find meaning, connection, and a sense of belonging in the world around us. The veil may obscure the truth, but it also invites us to explore, to question, and to search for deeper understanding. We may never fully pierce the veil, but in doing so we begin to see the beauty and the mystery, the complexity of perception, and the infinite possibilities that lie beyond the veil. You sit quietly, alone with your thoughts, and the world around you seems clear, tangible. The chair you're sitting in, the light coming through the window, the soft hum of distant sounds, all of it feels real. But then, a quiet doubt arises. What if everything you're experiencing is just a creation of your mind? This is the essence of internal world skepticism. It suggests that we cannot be certain that the world outside of our mind exists as we perceive it. What if the world, the objects, the people we interact with, are nothing more than projections of our own thoughts, experiences, and imagination? The idea is simple, yet profound. We are certain of one thing: we are experiencing something. But is it the world, or is it only a world within us? Can we trust that the reality we experience is more than a mental construct? How can we be sure that the world we perceive is not just a figment of our consciousness? Think about your thoughts. When you have an idea, an image, or a memory, it seems real to you, doesn't it? You can feel it, see it, experience it. But these things exist only within your mind. What if the same is true of the world around you? What if the entire world is merely a mental creation, experienced as though it were real, but entirely internal? Internal world skepticism challenges the very nature of our reality. We know we experience something, but we cannot be certain that what we experience corresponds to anything beyond our mind. The chair you sit in, the air you breathe, the room you inhabit, what if these things are not external to you, but part of an inner world, a world your mind has created? This skepticism does not deny that we experience things, it simply questions the nature of those experiences. What we perceive is not necessarily the truth of the world outside us, but a representation, a mental picture painted by our minds. The world we think we know might be nothing more than a series of impressions, fragments of our own inner world. Imagine for a moment that everything you experience is shaped by your mind, from the smallest details to the grandest structures. The world as you know it is not directly accessible. Instead, it is filtered through your senses, your thoughts, your perceptions, all of which are created by your mind. The external world in this view is nothing more than a reflection of your inner state. Internal world skepticism forces us to confront the possibility that we may never know if the world outside of us truly exists. Everything we know, everything we experience, is seen through the lens of our mind. How can we be sure that the world is not just a dream, a projection, or an elaborate mental construct? This view doesn't necessarily mean that everything is illusionary. It simply asks us to question our assumptions. We may feel certain that the world exists out there beyond us, but how can we be sure? All we know is the world that our mind presents to us. Beyond that, there is only uncertainty, a vast unknown. Consider the idea that all our senses, the sight of the world, the touch of objects, the sound of voices, are part of the same mental construct. These sensations are not the world itself, but interpretations of it, filtered through our minds. In this way, even our most immediate experiences are suspect, shaped by a mind that might not be as objective as we assume. The implications of internal world skepticism are profound. If we cannot trust our perception of the external world, then what do we truly know? What can we be certain of, if everything we experience is filtered through our mental faculties? The world outside of us becomes distant, elusive, and perhaps unknowable. And yet this skepticism does not lead to a denial of experience. On the contrary, it invites us to reflect on the nature of that experience. If everything we perceive is shaped by our mind, then how much of our reality is a reflection of our thoughts, our desires, our fears? The external world becomes a mirror, reflecting our inner state back to us. Internal world skepticism also opens the door to a deeper exploration of consciousness itself. If we cannot be sure that the world exists beyond our mind, then what does it mean to be conscious? What is the nature of awareness if all we know is a world that exists only within us? Consciousness becomes both the subject and the object of inquiry, a world in itself. Perhaps in embracing this skepticism, we begin to understand that reality is not something fixed, something solid and external. It is something fluid, dynamic, constantly shifting with our thoughts and perceptions. The world is not a static, unchanging thing, but an ongoing creation, shaped by the mind and experienced by the self. Yet this doesn't mean that the world is purely subjective. Even within the confines of our mind, there is a sense of order, coherence, and consistency. Our experiences, though filtered through our consciousness, follow patterns, abide by rules. The world we experience may be mental, but it is not entirely arbitrary. It is a reflection of something deeper, something structured. Internal world skepticism challenges us to accept that we may never fully know the nature of reality. But it also encourages us to embrace the mystery of existence, to acknowledge that the world we experience, though filtered and shaped by our mind, is still meaningful. The experiences we have, the world we live in, are still part of our journey, even if they are only known to us through our perception. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this skepticism is that it forces us to confront the limitations of our knowledge. If we cannot know the world as it truly is, then we must acknowledge the fragility of our understanding. What we know is never the whole story. We are always in the process of discovering, always in search of something beyond what we can perceive. And so as we drift into sleep, the world begins to fade. The sensations, the images, the thoughts, all of them are part of the mind's creation, part of the world we know. Whether that world exists beyond us or within us is a question we may never answer. But in that uncertainty, we find peace, knowing that the search for understanding is itself a journey worth taking. You sit quietly, your thoughts flowing gently, like a stream meandering through a peaceful landscape. You observe the world around you, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of life outside. But what if this world, this experience, is not directly accessible? What if it's all a representation in your mind? This is the foundation of representational theories of mind. These theories suggest that the mind does not experience the world directly, but instead constructs representations, mental images, concepts, and symbols based on sensory input. What we perceive, then, is not the world itself, but a mental map or model of it, built in our minds. Imagine the world as a vast, complex tapestry of sensory data. Your eyes, ears, and other senses take in information, but your mind does not directly experience this data. Instead, it processes it, filtering and translating it into something you can understand. The objects, sounds, and textures you perceive are all representations, not the raw reality. In this view, the mind acts as an intermediary between you and the world. The objects and events around you do not appear directly in your consciousness. Instead, they are transformed into mental images, symbols, and concepts. What you experience is not the external world, but an internal representation of it, created by your mind. Consider the color red. What you see as red is not the color itself, but the way your mind interprets the wavelengths of light your eyes receive. The experience of red is a representation in your mind, a construct that allows you to interact with the world. In this way, all of your perceptions are mediated, not direct experiences of the world. The theory challenges the notion of direct realism, the belief that we perceive the world exactly as it is. Instead, representational theories of mind suggest that the world as we know it is always filtered through our cognitive processes. We don't see the world as it truly is, we see it as our minds represent it to us, shaped by our sensory input and mental faculties. This leads to an important question. If all we experience are representations, how can we know anything about the world itself? How can we be certain that our representations are accurate reflections of external reality, rather than distorted, incomplete models? The gap between perception and reality seems to grow wider the more we consider it. The answer lies in the understanding that while our representations may not be perfect, they allow us to function in the world. Even if we cannot access the world directly, our mental representations are still effective for navigating it. They help us understand, predict, and respond to our environment, even if those representations are not an exact replica of reality. In this view, knowledge becomes a process of constructing and refining mental representations. We don't simply passively receive information, we actively interpret, organize, and make sense of it. The mind shapes our experience of the world, creating models that allow us to navigate our existence. What we know is always a reflection of these mental models, not the unmediated truth. Yet representational theories also raise a deeper issue. If the mind constructs these representations, then to what extent are they influenced by our experiences, our emotions, and our biases? Our mental models of the world are shaped not just by raw sensory data, but by our beliefs, our culture, and our past experiences. These factors can color the way we perceive and interpret the world. This idea challenges the notion of objective perception. If our mental representations are influenced by our individual perspectives, then can we ever truly know the world as it is, independent of our minds? The line between subjective experience and objective reality begins to blur, leaving us to question the nature of truth itself. But despite these complexities, representational theories of mind offer a useful framework for understanding how we interact with the world. They allow us to acknowledge that while we may never directly experience the external world, our mental representations provide us with the tools to engage with it meaningfully. We live in a world of mental models, but these models help us navigate the world effectively. This approach also underscores the active nature of perception. We are not passive receivers of information, but active creators of our experience. Our minds shape the world we perceive, organizing sensory data into representations that make sense to us. In this way, perception is not a mirror of reality, but a dynamic process of mental construction. And yet the question remains, how accurate are these representations? How closely do they match the world as it truly is? Representational theories suggest that while our mental models are useful, they are not perfect copies of reality. Our experience of the world is always mediated, always an interpretation, and never the unfiltered truth. The implications of this theory extend beyond perception. They touch on how we understand the nature of knowledge itself. If all we know is based on representations, then knowledge is not about discovering the world as it truly is, but about refining the mental models we use to navigate it. We can never fully escape our minds, we can only work with the models they provide. Representational theories of mind invite us to consider the limits of our knowledge. If all we can ever know is a mental representation of the world, then how can we be certain of anything? Can we ever break free from the mental models that shape our understanding? The answer, perhaps, is not to seek an ultimate, unmediated truth, but to refine and question our models of reality. In the end, these theories reveal the fluid, dynamic nature of our experience. The world is not something fixed, something solid and objective. It is a world of representations, constantly reshaped by our minds. What we perceive is not the world as it truly is, but a mental models that allows us to interact with it, understand it, and live within it. So as you rest, let this idea settle into your mind. The world you know is not the world itself, but a reflection, a representation that allows you to navigate existence. It is not a static, fixed reality, but a mental model, a dance between perception and thought, constantly evolving as you interact with the world around you. Imagine for a moment a room small, quiet, and enclosed. Inside the room, there is a person who does not understand Chinese. They are surrounded by a stack of Chinese characters, along with a large book of instructions that tells them how to match the symbols. Outside the room, someone is speaking Chinese, asking questions, expecting a response from the outside. Everything seems normal. The person inside the room appears to be communicating in Chinese as if they understand the language. The symbols they pass back and forth make sense to the Chinese speaker, and the conversation continues smoothly. But inside the room, the person is simply following instructions. They don't understand the language at all. This is the essence of the Chinese room argument, a thought experiment proposed by philosopher John Searle. It challenges our understanding of artificial intelligence and the nature of understanding itself. The person in the room, despite producing seemingly meaningful responses, does not understand the language. They are simply manipulating symbols based on a set of rules. The argument raises a deep question. If a machine can simulate understanding without truly understanding, does it actually know anything? If the person in the room can pass for someone who understands Chinese, but does not, then can a computer that mimics human conversation truly be said to understand it? Or is it merely following instructions, creating the illusion of understanding without any real awareness? At first, the Chinese room seems like a straightforward analogy for how machines process information. Just as the person inside the room is following rules to manipulate symbols, computers process data by following algorithms. They take inputs, perform calculations, and produce outputs. But does this mean they truly understand the information they process, or are they simply mimicking understanding? The question becomes even more profound when we consider the role of meaning. When we understand a language, we grasp the meaning behind the words. But the person in the Chinese room, despite producing coherent responses, does not grasp the meaning of the Chinese characters. They only know how to manipulate them according to the instructions in the book. So where does real understanding lie? The Chinese room argument suggests that understanding is not just about producing the right responses, it's about grasping the meaning behind the responses. A machine that can simulate conversation may appear intelligent, but does it truly understand what it is saying? Or is it simply a mechanical process, devoid of awareness or meaning? This thought experiment challenges the idea that behavior alone is enough to determine understanding. If a machine can answer questions in a way that mimics human conversation, does that mean it has the same kind of understanding? Or is it more like the person in the room, following a set of instructions without any true comprehension? In this way, the Chinese room argument forces us to rethink our assumptions about intelligence and consciousness. We often equate the ability to perform tasks with understanding, but the thought experiment suggests that there may be more to understanding than simply producing the right responses. True understanding may require awareness, something that a machine or a symbol manipulator can never truly possess. One of the key points of the argument is the distinction between syntax and semantics. Syntax refers to the rules that govern the structure of language, how words and symbols are arranged. Semantics, on the other hand, refers to the meaning behind those words and symbols. In the Chinese room, the person can follow the syntax of the language without grasping the semantics. This distinction highlights a critical limitation of artificial intelligence. Machines can process syntax, they can follow rules and produce outputs, but they do not understand the meaning behind the words. They lack the subjective experience that human understanding entails. The Chinese room suggests that true understanding is not just about following rules, but about having a mental experience of meaning. And so the Chinese room raises questions about the nature of consciousness. If understanding is more than just processing symbols, then what does it mean to be conscious? What does it mean to truly understand something? If machines can simulate understanding without being conscious, what does that tell us about the nature of our own minds? Some critics of the Chinese room argument argue that it is too narrow, that understanding can be realized through the manipulation of symbols, even if there is no subjective awareness. They suggest that the system as a whole, including the person, the book, and the instructions, might indeed understand the language. But this response does not address the core issue, the lack of subjective experience. This leads us to consider the implications for artificial intelligence. If machines can simulate intelligent behavior without truly understanding, then can they ever be said to be conscious or aware? Are we simply projecting our own understanding onto machines, mistaking their responses for genuine comprehension? The Chinese room argument challenges us to consider whether we are equating behavior with understanding in a way that might be misleading. In a world increasingly filled with intelligent machines, the Chinese room serves as a reminder that behavior and understanding are not the same thing. Just because a machine can produce human-like responses does not mean it has the same kind of awareness or understanding that a human does. It may be mimicking intelligence, but that does not necessarily mean it possesses it. The Chinese room argument also asks us to reflect on the nature of our own minds. What is it that makes us conscious, that allows us to understand language and meaning? Is it the mere manipulation of symbols, like the person in the room, or is there something deeper at work? The thought experiment forces us to confront the complexity of human understanding and consciousness. In the end, the Chinese room leaves us with more questions than answers. It asks us to consider the nature of understanding, the role of consciousness, and the limits of artificial intelligence. Can a machine ever truly understand the world, or will it always be trapped in the realm of syntax, mimicking human behavior without true comprehension? As you contemplate these questions, you might find the room around you slowly fading into the background. The answers may not be clear, but the exploration itself is part of the journey, one that unfolds as you reflect on the mysteries of the mind, language, and consciousness. You observe a bird perched on a branch, its feathers fluttering in the breeze. It seems to have a purpose, a direction, an intention. Perhaps it is hunting, or perhaps it is simply resting. But as you watch, a question arises: how do you know that this bird has an intention? This is the essence of Dennett's intentional stance, a concept proposed by philosopher Daniel Dennett. The intentional stance suggests that when we interpret the behavior of others, whether animals, machines, or people, we often attribute intentions and beliefs to them, even when we have no direct evidence of their inner experience. This stance is a tool for understanding behavior. When we look at the bird, we assume it is acting with purpose. We might say it is searching for food, or that it is avoiding danger. But what if it is simply responding to environmental stimuli without any real awareness or intention? The intentional stance invites us to consider the assumption that the bird, and all creatures, act with a kind of mental agency, even when we cannot directly access their inner world. Dennett's theory suggests that the intentional stance is not just a metaphor, it is a useful framework for understanding the behavior of complex systems. When we interpret actions, whether of a person, a machine, or an animal, we do so by attributing beliefs, desires, and goals to those actions. We don't need to understand the underlying processes, we simply use the intentional stance to predict and explain behavior. The intentional stance operates on a kind of functional assumption. We treat beings as if they are rational agents with desires and intentions, even if we cannot know for sure that they are conscious. By adopting this stance, we simplify the complexity of the world around us, enabling us to predict behavior and interact with it more effectively. For example, if you observe a robot navigating a room, you might describe its movements in terms of goals. It is avoiding obstacles, seeking a destination. You attribute intention to the robot's actions, but does the robot actually have intentions, or is it simply following a set of programmed instructions? The intentional stance doesn't require that the robot actually has consciousness, it just asks that we treat its behavior as if it does. This raises an intriguing question: what is the nature of intentionality itself? Is it something that exists only in the mind, or is it a useful way of describing behavior? Dennett's position suggests that intentionality is a functional tool, a way to describe and predict the behavior of systems, whether biological or artificial. It does not require that the system is conscious, but only that it behaves in a way that can be interpreted as intentional. One of the key insights of the intentional stance is that it is a pragmatic approach. It is not about seeking the underlying truth of a system's inner workings. It is about how we interact with that system. The intentional stance allows us to predict and interpret behavior by assuming that the system has beliefs, desires, and goals, even if we cannot directly observe them. This idea invites us to reconsider our understanding of consciousness. If we can treat non-conscious systems as though they have intentions, then what does it mean to be truly conscious? Perhaps consciousness is not an essential quality for having intentions. Perhaps intention is a way of describing behavior, independent of consciousness itself. Dennett's theory challenges us to think differently about the mind and its relationship to the world. It suggests that instead of seeking an elusive definition of consciousness or intent, we can simply observe the patterns of behavior and describe them in terms of intentionality. The question becomes less about what is happening inside a system and more about how we interpret and predict its actions. By adopting the intentional stance, we see the world through a lens of purposeful behavior. We interpret everything from people to machines, from animals to the natural world, as acting with intent, even when we cannot know what is going on beneath the surface. This stance shapes our understanding of how we relate to the world and the systems within it. Yet the intentional stance also leaves room for ambiguity. If we treat a system as if it has beliefs and desires, does that mean it actually does? Can we ever fully know what is happening inside another system, or are we always interpreting its behavior through our own assumptions? The intentional stance, in this way, is both a powerful tool and a reminder of the limits of our understanding. The usefulness of this perspective lies in its flexibility. It is not about whether a system is conscious, but how we can interact with it effectively. We treat systems as if they are intentional agents, because doing so allows us to predict their actions and understand their behavior. This pragmatic approach helps us navigate a world full of complex systems, both living and non-living. By applying the intentional stance, we are not claiming that all systems are conscious or that they have subjective experiences. We are simply assuming, for the sake of understanding, that they act with purpose and intention. It is a tool for simplifying the complexity of the world, a lens through which we can make sense of behavior without delving into the inaccessible depths of consciousness. This approach, though practical, also raises questions about how we relate to other beings. If we treat all systems as though they have intentions, does that mean we are projecting our own sense of agency onto them? Are we misinterpreting behavior, attributing to them qualities they may not actually possess? The intentional stance invites us to reflect on our assumptions and the ways we relate to the world. Dennett's theory also implies that intentionality is not a fixed quality of certain beings, but a flexible tool we use to describe behavior. It suggests that, to understand the world, we may not need to delve into the consciousness of other systems. Instead, we can focus on the patterns of behavior and describe them as purposeful, regardless of the inner workings that produce them. This approach challenges the distinction between the conscious and the non-conscious. If we can apply the intentional stance to both living organisms and machines, then where do we draw the line between what is intentional and what is not? Perhaps Dennett suggests intentionality is less about the internal experience of a system and more about the way we engage with it, interpreting its behavior as meaningful. In the end, the intentional stance is a tool for understanding and interacting with the world. It does not require us to probe the depths of consciousness or determine what is happening inside another system. It simply asks us to engage with the world as if it were filled with intentional agents and to observe how that perspective shapes our understanding of behavior. You sit quietly, your thoughts flowing gently, observing the world around you. A pen lies on the table in front of you, a notebook beside it. You pick up the pen, write a few words, and as you do, a question arises: where do your thoughts end, and where does the pen begin? This is the essence of the extended mind hypothesis. The theory suggests that our mind is not confined solely to the brain, but extends into the world around us. The tools we use, our notebooks, pens, smartphones, are not just objects, they are part of our cognitive system, essential extensions of our thinking process. When you write something down, it is not just a reflection of your thoughts. The pen, the paper, the act of writing, these are part of the way you think. According to the extended mind hypothesis, our cognitive processes are not limited to the brain. They stretch outward into the environment, into the objects we interact with. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a map. The brain is at the center, but the map extends outward, incorporating everything around you. The pen in your hand, the notebook in front of you, your computer, all these objects become extensions of your cognitive system, tools that help you think, remember, and create. In this view, thinking is not a solitary activity confined to the brain. It is an interaction between the brain and the world. The mind reaches beyond the body, using the environment to support and enhance cognitive processes. Your mind is not just something inside your head, it is distributed across your interactions with the world. The extended mind hypothesis challenges our traditional understanding of the mind. We tend to think of cognition as something that happens exclusively in the brain, a private process that exists within the boundaries of our skull. But what if the mind is not confined at all? What if it is a fluid, open system that integrates with the tools around us? Consider your smartphone, for example. When you look up information, use apps or set reminders, your phone becomes an extension of your mind. It stores information, helps you organize your thoughts, and assists with memory. It is not merely an object. It is part of your cognitive process, an external aid that enhances your thinking. In the same way, a notebook serves as an extension of your memory. When you write something down, you are offloading information from your mind onto the page. Your thoughts are no longer contained only in your brain. They are externalized, allowing you to think more clearly, remember more effectively, and engage with the world in new ways. This hypothesis also raises questions about the nature of cognition itself. If the mind extends beyond the brain, what does that say about the relationship between mind and body? Is the body itself an extension of the mind, or is the mind merely a process that flows through the body and the world? The boundaries of mind, it seems, are much more fluid than we once thought. The idea of the extended mind shifts our perspective on cognition. We are not isolated thinkers locked away in our heads. Instead, we are beings who interact with the world, using tools to think, remember, and create. Our minds are shaped by the environment, and in turn we shape that environment to suit our cognitive needs. This perspective also invites us to think about the role of technology in our lives. Devices like smartphones, computers, and even pens and paper are not simply external objects. They are part of our cognitive system, tools that help us navigate the world, solve problems, and make sense of our experiences. The boundary between our minds and these objects blurs. But if our minds extend into the world, what does that mean for the way we think about personal identity? If our thoughts are not confined to our brains, are we defined by the tools we use? Are we still the same person when we write something down versus when we think it? The question of what constitutes the self becomes more complex. The extended mind hypothesis also touches on the way we interact with the world. When we use external tools, we are not just manipulating objects, we are engaging in a cognitive process that shapes our understanding of the world. The world is not just something we experience, it is something we actively engage with, using our minds and tools to make sense of it. This idea invites us to reconsider what it means to be human. If our minds extend into the world, then thinking is not just an individual process, it is a shared activity, one that connects us to the world and to other people. Our minds are not separate from the world, they are part of it, woven into the fabric of our experiences. Yet the extended mind hypothesis also raises questions about the limits of the mind. If tools and objects become part of our cognitive system, does that mean the mind is infinite, without boundaries, or are there still limits to what can be considered part of the mind? At what point does the mind end and the external world begin? This theory also forces us to think about the future of cognitive technology. As technology continues to evolve, how might our relationship to tools and the environment change? Will our minds become even more intertwined with external devices? Could we one day have a mind that is seamlessly integrated with technology, extending further than ever before? For now, the extended mind hypothesis offers a new way of thinking about cognition. It suggests that our minds are not fixed within our skulls, but stretch outward into the world. The tools we use are not just objects, they are extensions of ourselves, shaping and enhancing our cognitive abilities. Our minds are a fluid, dynamic interaction between our brains, bodies, and the world. And so, as you rest and let the world around you fade, think about the tools that help you think, the objects that support your mind. The pen, the paper, the phone, the computer, each one an extension of your thoughts, a way of engaging with the world. The mind, it seems, is not just in you, it is all around you. You open your eyes and take in the world around you, the shape of the room, the soft light streaming through the window, the objects scattered across the floor. Everything seems real, fixed, tangible. But what if what you're experiencing is not the world as it truly is, but an interface, a kind of filter between you and reality? This is the heart of the interface theory of perception. According to this theory, our perceptions are not accurate representations of the external world, but rather interfaces designed to help us navigate it. Like the screen of a smartphone, our perceptions are simplified, abstracted views of the world, designed not to show us the world as it is, but as it is useful for us to interact with. Imagine for a moment that our senses, sight, sound, touch, are not windows to reality, but tools like the icons on a computer screen. The world we experience is not the world itself, but a set of representations that allow us to interact with the deeper, more complex reality that exists beyond our perception. What we see, hear, and feel is merely a simplified version of a much richer world. In this view, the world we perceive is not an accurate reflection of what exists outside of us. Instead, it is a version of reality designed by evolution to help us survive and function. Our senses give us the information we need to navigate the world effectively, but they do not present the full picture. They present a version that is useful, not complete. Think about the icons on a computer screen. They represent programs and files, but they are not the programs themselves. When you click an icon, you interact with something much more complex, something hidden behind the interface. In the same way, the world we perceive is a set of icons, simplified representations of a much more intricate reality. This theory suggests that perception is not about seeing the world as it truly is, but about using the senses to interact with it. Our perceptions are not designed to give us a complete view of reality, but to help us navigate it. What we see is a tool, a representation that allows us to engage with the deeper world, not a direct reflection of it. The interface theory of perception challenges our traditional understanding of perception. We tend to think of our senses as passive receivers of information, bringing us an accurate picture of the world. But what if our senses are not designed to show us the world as it is, but to help us interact with it in a way that ensures survival? Consider how you experience color. Colors are not inherent qualities of objects, but the result of how your eyes and brain process light. The perception of color is not a direct representation of the object, but a simplification that allows us to differentiate between objects, to navigate our environment, to make decisions. Color is an interface, not an accurate depiction of reality. This idea extends to all of our perceptions. The sounds we hear are not the sounds themselves, but the result of how our ears and brain interpret vibrations in the air. The textures we feel, the tastes we experience, each one is a simplified interface that helps us navigate the world, but none of them show us the world in its full complexity. The interface theory also suggests that reality is far more complex than we can ever perceive. We see only a small slice of the world, shaped by the limitations of our senses. The world beyond our perception is vast, intricate, and hidden from view. Our perceptions are not an accurate reflection of reality, but a tool that allows us to interact with it. This leads to a profound question. If our perceptions are not accurate representations of reality, can we ever truly know the world as it is? The interface theory suggests that we cannot. Our senses give us a version of the world that is useful, but not true in the way we traditionally think of truth. We are limited by the interface our senses provide. But this does not mean that our perceptions are irrelevant. The interface we experience is still essential for interacting with the world. Without it, we would be lost, unable to function in our environment. The theory doesn't suggest that perception is flawed, but that it is shaped by the needs of survival, not the need for an accurate view of reality. Consider how we interact with technology. When we use a smartphone or a computer, we engage with an interface, a simplified version of something much more complex. In the same way, we interact with the world through a simplified interface, a set of representations designed to help us navigate the complexities of reality. We don't see the full picture, but we don't need to in order to function. In this way, perception is a tool, not a window. We are not passively receiving information about the world, but actively engaging with it, using our senses to simplify and interact with reality. Our perceptions are not a reflection of the world, but a set of symbols, a map, guiding us through the complexities of existence. The interface theory of perception invites us to reconsider our relationship to the world. It challenges the idea that we can ever truly know reality as it is, suggesting instead that we experience only a version of it, shaped by the needs of our survival. What we see, hear, and feel is a map, not the terrain itself. This perspective also forces us to think about the limits of our knowledge. If our perceptions are simplified versions of reality, then what can we truly know? How can we be certain that our understanding of the world is accurate if our perceptions only show us a small slice of it? The interface theory reminds us that our understanding is always limited, always mediated, and yet despite these limitations, our perceptions are powerful. They allow us to function, to interact with the world, to make decisions and navigate our environment. The interface may be simplified, but it is enough to allow us to survive and thrive. It is a tool, not a perfect representation, but a tool that serves our needs. The world in this view is not something we can fully know or grasp. It is a vast, intricate reality, hidden behind the interface of our perception. What we see is not the world itself, but a simplified version of it, a set of representations that guide us through life, helping us to navigate a world too complex to understand fully. As you rest, think of your senses as interfaces, guiding you through the world. What you see, hear, and feel is not a direct reflection of reality, but a simplified map that helps you make sense of the world around you. The complexity of the world remains hidden, and yet through your senses, you interact with it in ways that keep you grounded, connected, and alive. You close your eyes for a moment, and in that quiet space, a question arises. How do you know that what you experience, the sounds you hear, the colors you see, the thoughts you think, is truly real? What if your brain, in fact, is simply predicting the world around you, constructing it from the inside out? This is the essence of predictive processing, a theory that suggests the brain is not simply reacting to sensory information, but actively predicting it. Every perception, every experience is a kind of controlled hallucination, a prediction made by your brain based on past experiences, expectations, and sensory input. The world you perceive is, in a sense, something your mind creates. Imagine that your brain is constantly making guesses about the world, filling in the gaps with predictions based on past experiences. As you move through the world, your brain adjusts those predictions, comparing them to the sensory data it receives. The difference between what you expect and what you experience is what we perceive as the present moment. In this view, perception is not a passive process of receiving data from the world. Instead, your brain is an active agent, constantly generating predictions about what will happen next. These predictions are refined and updated with each sensory input, adjusting the picture of reality that you experience. The world is not simply out there waiting to be perceived. It is in part a creation of your mind. This theory suggests that perception is not just about sensing the world as it is about filling in the blanks, making sense of the chaos around us. Your brain uses past experiences to generate expectations about what will happen, and those expectations shape the way you perceive the world. In this sense, Reality is always being predicted and constructed by your mind. Consider the simple act of walking through a room. Your brain has already predicted where the furniture is, how your body will move through the space, and how the light will change. As you walk, your brain constantly checks these predictions against the sensory data it receives, adjusting the world you perceive in real time. Your perception is not just reactive, but dynamic, constantly adjusting to align with your brain's predictions. But what if this process goes wrong? What if your brain's predictions are off, creating an inaccurate or distorted perception of the world? In this case, you might experience what we call a hallucination, a perception that does not align with external reality. But according to predictive processing, even what we consider a normal perception is already a kind of controlled hallucination. It is the brain's best guess, constantly revised. The idea of controlled hallucinations challenges the traditional view of perception as a passive reflection of reality. It suggests that perception is an active process of construction, not a mere reception of data. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what you will experience, filling in the gaps with its best guesses. What you perceive is not the world itself, but a dynamic, ever-evolving prediction of it. This also means that your brain is not simply a receiver of sensory data, but a generator of reality. It takes information from the outside world and interprets it, adjusting its predictions based on what it has learned. Your perceptions are not just passive impressions of the world, but active creations, guided by your brain's expectations and experiences. Consider the phenomenon of optical illusions. When you look at an image, your brain interprets it in a way that is consistent with your past experiences, even if that interpretation is incorrect. Your brain is making predictions based on past knowledge, sometimes leading you to perceive something that isn't there. In this way, even what you think of as objective reality is shaped by the brain's predictions. Predictive processing also offers an explanation for the nature of perception itself. If perception is not about receiving a true representation of the world, but about predicting it, then how do we know when our perceptions are accurate? The answer, perhaps, is that we don't. We can never fully escape the mind's predictions. Our experience of reality is always mediated by these guesses. This brings us to a deeper question. If the brain is constantly predicting the world, then what is the role of external reality in shaping our perceptions? How much of what we experience is truly out there, and how much is constructed by our mind? Predictive processing suggests that the boundary between external reality and internal experience is more fluid than we might think. In this view, the world becomes a collaboration between the external environment and the mind's predictions. The world provides sensory input, but the brain actively constructs what we perceive from that input. What we experience as reality is not just an external world, but a co-creation shaped by both our brain's predictions and the raw data from the environment. The controlled hallucinations we experience are not random or arbitrary. They are the brain's best attempt to make sense of the world, to predict what will happen and create a coherent experience. In this sense, perception is not about passively receiving information, but actively constructing a model of the world based on predictions, sensory input, and past experiences. This theory also invites us to consider the nature of consciousness itself. If perception is a process of prediction and construction, then consciousness might be, in part, the awareness of these predictions. The mind is not merely reacting to the world, but actively shaping it, and consciousness is the awareness of this ongoing process of construction. What, then, does this mean for our understanding of reality? If what we perceive is always a controlled hallucination, then what is real? The answer is not simple. Perhaps reality is not something fixed, something we can access directly. Instead, it may be something constantly shaped by our minds, a reality that is always in flux, always predicted, always created, and yet despite this fluidity, we still function in the world. Our predictions guide our actions, help us navigate the complexities of life, and keep us connected to the world around us. The brain's best guesses are not always wrong. They allow us to interact with the world in meaningful ways, even if those perceptions are never fully accurate representations of reality. As you drift into sleep, let the idea of controlled hallucinations settle gently into your mind. The world you experience is not a passive reflection of reality, but an active construction, a prediction that unfolds moment by moment. Reality is not fixed or certain. It is a dance between the mind's expectations and the world it seeks to understand. You sit quietly, your thoughts drifting gently, observing the world around you, the chair beneath you, the soft hum of distant sounds, the quiet rhythm of your breath. But how do you know this world is real? What if everything you experience, every sensation, is simply a creation of your brain? This is the concept of neural correlates of consciousness, a theory that suggests the experience of reality is not just about the world outside, but about how our brain processes and interprets sensory information. Our perception of reality, in this view, is not a direct encounter with the world, but a construction built by neural activity. Imagine that the world you experience, the colors, the sounds, the shapes, is not directly out there in front of you, but is instead the result of complex patterns of neural activity inside your brain. Every sensation, every thought is a neural process that your brain uses to build a picture of the world around you. This world is not just perceived, it is constructed. The brain, according to this theory, is constantly working to interpret the raw data it receives from the senses. But this data is not a perfect reflection of the world. The brain organizes it, processes it, and makes sense of it, creating a model of the world that allows you to navigate, to survive, to interact. Your perception is a map, not the territory itself. The neural correlates of consciousness are the specific patterns of brain activity that correspond to conscious experience. These patterns are not random or chaotic. They are the brain's way of organizing and interpreting information, constructing the reality you experience. The brain creates this reality, not by passively receiving data, but by actively making predictions, filling in the gaps, and constructing meaning. But what does this mean for the nature of reality itself? If our experience of the world is built by our brains, how can we be certain that the world outside of us is anything like the world we perceive? Could it be that the reality we experience is not the world as it truly is, but a mental construction shaped by the limits of our brain's processing power? This question challenges our traditional understanding of perception. We tend to think of our senses as windows to the world, passive receivers of external information. But neural correlates in constructed reality suggest that our senses are more like tools, shaping and filtering the world we experience, creating a model that is useful for interacting with reality, but not necessarily an accurate representation of it. Every experience we have, from the simplest to the most complex, is mediated by neural activity. The brain takes in sensory data, processes it, and creates a coherent picture of the world. But this picture is not the world itself. It is a mental construct, a representation that allows us to interact with the world in ways that are necessary for survival and action. Consider how you see the world. What you experience as red is not an objective property of an object, but the result of how your brain processes wavelengths of light. The color, the texture, the shape, all of these are not directly out there in the world, but are constructed by the brain, based on the sensory data it receives. This theory also suggests that our minds are not passive recipients of reality, but active creators of it. The brain is constantly predicting, interpreting, and filling in the blanks. What we perceive as reality is not a direct reflection of the world, but a construction shaped by our brain's interpretation of the sensory data it receives. If reality is a construction, then what does it mean to truly experience something? Are we ever truly experiencing the world as it is, or are we always experiencing a mental model of it, filtered through the lens of our brain's processes? The answer, perhaps, is that we never truly experience the world directly. We only experience our brain's version of it. This theory also raises important questions about the nature of consciousness. If the brain is constructing our experience of reality, then what is consciousness itself? Is consciousness simply the brain's way of organizing and processing information, or is it something more, something beyond the neural activity that creates our perception of the world? Neural correlates in constructed reality suggest that consciousness is not a passive experience, but an active process. The brain is constantly constructing the reality we experience, and consciousness is the awareness of this construction. In this way, our consciousness is not a reflection of an external world, but a reflection of our brain's activity as it creates that world. But what does this mean for our understanding of truth and reality? If our perception is a mental construction, then how can we ever know what is true? The answer might be that we cannot. Our brains create a version of reality that is useful for interacting with the world, but this version is not necessarily the truth. It is a model, a representation, not the raw, unfiltered reality. In this view, the world we experience is always mediated, always shaped by the brain. Even though we experience the world as solid, real, and objective, it is ultimately a product of neural activity. Our senses, our thoughts, our perceptions, all of them are part of a process that creates a reality that is useful but not necessarily true. Yet this does not make our experience any less real. The reality we experience, though constructed by the brain, is the world we live in. It is the world we interact with, the world that shapes our actions, our choices, and our understanding of ourselves. While it may not be the world as it truly is, it is the world we inhabit, and it is meaningful. The theory also opens up new ways of thinking about the relationship between mind and body. If the brain is the creator of our reality, then does that mean the mind is simply the product of the brain's activity? Or is there more to consciousness, something beyond the neural processes that construct our experience? The boundary between mind and brain begins to blur. In the end, neural correlates and constructed reality force us to rethink our assumptions about perception, reality, and consciousness. We may never fully access the world as it is, but the world we experience is real in its own way. It is a construction shaped by the brain's activity, and yet it is the only world we can know. You sit quietly, watching the world around you shift, the hours passing like soft whispers in the distance. The sun rises, then sets. The day fades into night. Time moves relentlessly, or so it seems. But what if the flow of time, the way we experience it, is an illusion? This is the essence of the illusions of temporal flow, a concept that challenges our deeply held belief that time flows like a river, always moving forward, never stopping. What if time is not something that moves at all, but something that our minds construct? What if the feeling of time passing is a trick of perception? Imagine that time is not a continuous stream, but a collection of moments, isolated and fixed. The sensation of time flowing is a creation of the mind, an experience shaped by memory and anticipation, not by some external objective passage. Time, in this view, is not a force but a perception, an illusion we experience. We are accustomed to thinking of time as a linear progression, past, present, future. We measure it with clocks, and we organize our lives around it. But this linear flow of time, the unbroken march from one moment to the next, might not reflect the true nature of time. It might simply be a way of organizing our experiences. In reality, the past, present, and future are not distinct points along a continuous line. The past is no longer accessible, the future has not yet arrived. What we experience is only the present moment, and yet the mind fills in the gaps, creating a sense of flow, of movement through time. The flow of time might not be something we experience directly, but something our minds impose on the world. This idea invites us to question the very nature of our experience. If time does not flow, then what is it? How do we experience the passage of time if it is not a continuous objective process? Perhaps time is more like a series of snapshots, moments frozen in place, and it is the mind that arranges them into a narrative of flow. The illusion of temporal flow is deeply embedded in our consciousness. We feel the passing of time in the ticking of a clock, in the changing of seasons, in the aging of our bodies. But what if these are not signs of time flowing, but markers that help our minds organize experience, that allow us to make sense of the world? Consider how we experience memories. We remember the past as a sequence of events, a story that unfolds in our minds. We anticipate the future in much the same way, imagining what will come next. But in the present moment, we have no direct access to past or future. The only thing we truly experience is the now, yet our minds constantly project the past and future into the present. The illusions of temporal flow challenge the notion that time is something objective and external, something that exists independently of us. Instead, time becomes a mental construct shaped by our perception. The flow of time is not something that exists in the world, but something our minds create to make sense of our experiences. This theory suggests that time is more like a story, a narrative we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. The past is a collection of memories, the future is a collection of predictions, the present is the only moment we can truly experience, but it is always fleeting, always slipping away, as we look back and forward. Yet despite this illusion, we continue to experience time as a flow. We measure it with clocks, we plan our lives around it, we structure our days based on it. The feeling of time passing, of events unfolding in a continuous stream, is so deeply ingrained in our experience that it feels undeniable, like a fundamental truth of existence. This illusion is so powerful that it shapes not only how we live our lives, but how we understand the universe. We speak of the past, present, and future as if they are real, separate moments. But what if these divisions are artificial? What if the true nature of time is something far more fluid, more malleable than we realize? Consider the possibility that time, like space, is not a fixed entity, but a construct of perception. What if our experience of time passing is just a way for our minds to organize events, to make sense of change? If time does not flow, then perhaps it is not something we can truly experience, but something we create as we navigate the world. The illusions of temporal flow invite us to rethink our relationship with time. What if time is not something that moves, but something that we move through? What if the feeling of time passing is just a byproduct of our perception, a mental model that helps us make sense of the changes we witness, the events we experience? This theory also opens up new possibilities for how we understand the future and the past. If time is not a flow, but a set of moments, then the future and past might not be as separate from the present as we think. Perhaps they are not separate at all, but part of the same ongoing experience, part of the same mental construct we use to understand the world. You find yourself in a quiet room, gazing at the objects around you. The present moment feels vivid, real, tangible. You know that time is moving forward, seconds slip into minutes, and moments pass in an endless stream. But what if time is not like that at all? What if everything is already laid out, fixed in place? This is the heart of block universe theory, a philosophical concept that suggests time is not a flowing stream, but a vast, unchanging block. In this view, the past, present, and future all coexist simultaneously, laid out in a single eternal block of time. What we perceive as the flow of time is merely an illusion, a trick of consciousness. Imagine that time is like a massive, immovable sculpture. Every event, every moment is already carved into it, fixed and unchangeable. The past, the present, and the future are not separate or fleeting. They are all there, coexisting in this block, and our experience of moving through time is simply our awareness shifting through this already existing structure. In the block universe, there is no true passing of time. Time is seen as a fourth dimension, just like space, with every moment existing at once. The idea that time flows is a perceptual illusion. Just as all locations in space exist simultaneously, so too do all moments in time. The world in this sense is already written, and we are simply moving through it. This theory challenges our deeply held intuition that time flows in a linear progressive way. We feel as though time is moving forward, that the future is yet to come, and the past is behind us. But block universe theory suggests that this feeling of motion is just an illusion, a mental construct that helps us navigate the world, but doesn't reflect the true nature of time. In the block universe, there is no distinction between the past, present, and future in the way we normally think about them. The past is not something that fades away, nor is the future something that is yet to be written. Instead, the past, present, and future are all fixed and unchanging. The present moment is just our subjective experience moving through this block of time. This view also suggests that our choices, our actions, and even our future are all already part of the structure of the universe. The future is not something that is constantly unfolding, but something that already exists in the block. In this sense, free will, as we typically understand it, becomes a complicated concept, as our actions may already be part of the block of time. If the future is already laid out, then what does it mean to experience the passage of time? The answer may be that we experience time not as it is, but as we perceive it. Our consciousness moves through the block, shifting from one moment to the next, giving us the illusion of progression. But in truth, the moments we experience were always there, already part of the cosmic structure. Consider the analogy of a movie. When you watch a film, it may appear to unfold in real time, but every frame of the film exists on the reel, already fixed in place. You are simply moving through the frames, experiencing the story as it unfolds, but the story itself is already written, already fixed. In the same way, the events of your life, from birth to death, are part of a fixed narrative. In this view, your life is not a sequence of moments passing by, but a story already told, experienced in the present. The moments you encounter are like frames in the film of your life. They are fixed and already part of the block, and your consciousness moves through them, experiencing them as if they are unfolding in real time, though they have always existed. This idea raises profound questions about our perception of time. If time is a block, then how do we reconcile this with the way we experience it? Why does the world feel like it is progressing if it is already fixed? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of consciousness itself. Our awareness moves through the block, and it is this movement that gives us the sensation of the passage of time. Block universe theory also invites us to think about the nature of time and space. If time is a fourth dimension, like space, then the universe can be seen as a vast, unchanging entity where every event and moment exists all at once. The feeling of time flowing is a result of our consciousness navigating through this unchanging block, just as we navigate through the three dimensions of space. In this sense, our experience of time is not the experience of a world changing, but the experience of moving through a world that is already set. The moments we perceive as the present are simply sections of the block of time that we are currently aware of, while the past and future exist just as tangibly, even if we cannot directly access them. This idea also forces us to reconsider the nature of causality. In our ordinary experience, events seem to unfold in a cause and effect relationship. The past causes the present, and the present causes the future. But in the block universe, all moments exist together, and causality becomes a part of the block. The chain of events that we think of as the flow of time is simply our perception of moving through this fixed structure. Perhaps this is the true nature of time, not something that passes, but something that exists all at once. The future does not lie ahead of us, nor does the past lie behind us. All moments are equally real, equally fixed, and it is only our experience of them that gives us the sense of movement. The past, present, and future are not different from each other. They are all simply part of a vast eternal block. In the end, the block universe theory invites us to see time differently. It suggests that what we experience as the passage of time is not the movement of time itself, but our movement through a structure that already exists. Time is not flowing forward. It is a block, a solid, unchanging reality, and we are simply shifting through its moments. This theory encourages us to reconsider our relationship with time. If time is a block, fixed and unchanging, then our experience of it becomes a kind of cosmic dance, moving through the events of our lives. The illusion of time flowing is not a mistake, but a feature of the way we experience our existence in the universe. You are standing at the edge of a calm lake, watching the surface ripple gently under the evening sky. The sun dips slowly behind the hills, casting long shadows across the water. For a moment, you are lost in the stillness, caught in the beauty of the present. But then, something shifts. A quiet thought arises. Is this moment truly fleeting, or is it already set in stone? This is the question at the heart of eternalism, a philosophical concept that suggests that time is not a flowing river, but a vast, unchanging landscape. In this view, all moments, past, present, and future, exist equally, side by side, as if time were a dimension, like space, where every event is already fixed and unchanging. The now, as we experience it, may not be the real present at all. Imagine that the moment you are experiencing right now, the ripples on the lake, the fading light of the sunset, is not the only present. According to eternalism, all moments are equally real, and the present is not a unique point in time. Every moment exists in its own right, like a frame in a film, laid out before you. The now is simply the one your consciousness is currently aware of. In this view, the past is not something that fades away, nor is the future something that is yet to be. All moments in time are real, and the only difference is that we experience one at a time. What seems like a flowing, ever-moving present is in fact just one fixed point that we move through in the vast landscape of time. The now is not a privileged moment, it is just our current perception. Eternalism invites us to reconsider the nature of the present moment. We often think of the present as the only real time, the only time that matters, but what if all moments, past, present, and future, are equally real? What if your memories, the events of the past, are just as real as what you're experiencing right now? And what if the future already exists, waiting to unfold? This theory challenges the idea of the now as a fleeting, unique moment. If all moments exist simultaneously, then the feeling that time is passing, that the present is slipping away, is an illusion. The present moment is not a flowing river, but a fixed and eternal part of the larger landscape of time, where all events exist in harmony. Consider how we experience time. We measure it, divide it into seconds and minutes, and structure our lives around it. We feel as though time is moving forward, always progressing. But if eternalism is correct, this feeling of progression is a trick of perception. We are simply moving through a timeline, unaware that every point in time exists at once. The death of the now in eternalism forces us to rethink how we understand time itself. If all moments are equally real, then the past does not disappear, and the future does not remain unknown. The future is just as concrete as the present, and the past is just as alive as the moment we are living in. Time is not something that moves, but something that simply is. This also brings into question our relationship with memory and anticipation. If the past and future are already real, then our memories are not just reflections of events that have occurred, they are part of the landscape of time, as real and as tangible as anything happening right now. Likewise, the future is not a vague concept, but an event already laid out before us, existing in the same way that the present moment does. Eternalism challenges our understanding of change. We often think of change as a continuous flow, a process by which things move from one state to another. But if all moments are equally real, then change is not something that happens over time. It is simply a way of viewing the unchanging structure of time. We do not experience change, we experience a succession of moments, each just as real as the one before. In this view, life itself becomes a journey through a landscape of moments, each one already set in place, each one existing at once. Our experience of moving through time is not an experience of change, but an experience of moving from one fixed point to the next, like a traveler crossing a vast, unchanging terrain. The implications of eternalism extend beyond time. If time itself is a fixed structure, then perhaps all of existence is equally fixed, just as the past, present, and future are equally real, so too are all events in space. What we perceive as the unfolding of time might be a mere illusion, a shift in our perception as we move through the unchanging fabric of reality. This view also forces us to reconsider the nature of free will. If all moments are equally real, then is our experience of choice simply the feeling of moving through a predetermined set of possibilities? Is free will just another illusion, a way for us to experience the vast landscape of time without understanding that all choices are already laid out before us? Yet, despite the implications of eternalism, we continue to live as though the present is fleeting, as though the future is uncertain, and the past is behind us. This theory does not change how we experience the world. It only suggests that our experience is based on a perception of time that might not reflect its true nature. The now is not as unique as we think it is, but it is still our reality. Perhaps the most profound aspect of eternalism is the way it reshapes our sense of existence. If every moment exists, then we are not moving through time, we are experiencing it. The flow of time, the sense of past and future, is a product of how we perceive the unchanging structure of time. We are not traveling through time, we are simply aware of the moments that already exist. The death of the now forces us to confront the limits of our perception. If all moments exist at once, then perhaps we are not as free as we think. But in this realization, there is also a deep sense of peace, a recognition that time is not something to chase or fear. It simply is, laid out before us, vast and eternal. You sit still, your thoughts drifting like clouds across a sky. In the distance you hear the ticking of a clock, each second marked in the quiet of the room. Time seems so certain, so tangible, yet what if time itself is not a fundamental part of the universe, but something that arises from deeper hidden layers of reality? This is the core of the idea that time is an emergent phenomenon. According to this view, time is not a basic, unchanging feature of the universe, but something that arises from the interactions of smaller, more fundamental elements. It emerges from the very fabric of reality, like a wave rising from the ocean, seemingly real but not a permanent part of the world. Imagine for a moment that time is not something that exists on its own, but something that emerges from the interactions of particles, fields, and forces. Just as temperature arises from the motion of molecules, time might emerge from the way things interact at the most fundamental levels. Time is not an intrinsic property of the universe, it is something that comes into being as part of the structure of the world. In this view, time is not a starting point, but a result. The universe, at its most basic level, is timeless, a vast, still landscape. But as particles and forces interact, they give rise to the sensation of time, of past, present, and future. Time is the way we experience those interactions, a product of the underlying fabric of reality, not something built into it. This challenges our conventional understanding of time as a fundamental, ever-present force. We tend to think of time as something that is always there, always moving forward, an essential part of the way the universe works. But if time is emergent, then it is not something we can take for granted. It is something that depends on the dynamics of the universe, a product of how things interact. Think of the way heat emerges from the motion of molecules. Heat is not something that exists independently, but something that arises from the movement of individual particles. Similarly, time might emerge from the interactions of smaller, more fundamental forces and particles. What we experience as time is not a constant, but a phenomenon that emerges from the complex behavior of the universe. If time is emergent, then perhaps it is not as fixed and unchanging as we believe. We experience time as a constant flow, but this may be an illusion created by the way the universe organizes itself. Time in this view is not a thing in itself, but a product of the interactions that make up reality. It is a byproduct, not a foundation. This idea also raises questions about the nature of the past and future. If time is emergent, then the past and future may not be as fixed as we imagine. The past is not something that exists independently, waiting to be remembered, and the future is not something that is written in stone, waiting to be revealed. Both are aspects of the emergent process of time. Consider how we experience time in our daily lives. We measure it with clocks, divide it into seconds and minutes, and structure our lives around it. But this experience of time may be tied to our perception of the emergent nature of reality. Time flows as we interact with the world, but it may not be a flow at all. It may simply be our experience of the patterns and rhythms of the universe. If time is emergent, then perhaps it is not the same at every level of reality. On a human scale, time seems to move in a linear way. But at the level of quantum particles, the notion of time becomes far more fluid. Time as we know it might only emerge at a certain scale, at the scale of our perception and experience, while at a deeper level, time may not behave the way we think it does. This theory challenges our perception of reality. If time is not fundamental, but a result of the interactions of particles and forces, then reality itself is not the way we perceive it. The experience of time, like the experience of color or sound, is a mental construct shaped by the way we interact with the world. Time is not something we see, but something we create through our experience of reality. In this view, time does not exist as a constant in the universe. Instead, it is a feature of the world that emerges as a result of the way things interact. The universe might be timeless at its core, and time as we know it is simply a byproduct of the universe's organization, something that emerges when certain conditions are met. If time is emergent, then the flow of time might not be real in the way we think. We experience time as moving forward, but this sensation may be a product of the emergent nature of time itself. Just as we perceive heat, but heat is not a substance in itself, we perceive time moving, but time may not actually flow. It may simply arise from the interactions of the world around us. The idea of time as an emergent phenomenon also invites us to think about the nature of change. If time is not a constant, then change itself might not be the linear process we imagine. The way we experience change, events happening in sequence, one after the other, might be a result of the way time emerges from the underlying structure of reality. This theory also challenges our understanding of the universe. If time is emergent, then reality itself might not be a series of discrete events unfolding in time. Instead, it might be a complex, interwoven network of interactions, and time as we experience it is simply our way of organizing those interactions. The universe might not be a timeline but a dynamic web of events that gives rise to the experience of time. In the end, time as an emergent phenomenon forces us to rethink what we know about the world. We experience time as a steady flow, but this might be an illusion created by the deeper dynamics of the universe. Time in this view is not a constant, it is a product of the universe's interactions, arising when the conditions are right and fading away when they are not. You sit in a room, the quiet around you broken only by the faint hum of distant sounds. The walls are solid, the floor beneath your feet real and steady. But what if this reality you see, feel, and touch is not the true nature of existence? What if everything around you is just a projection, a shadow on the surface of something much deeper? This is the essence of the holographic principle, a theory that suggests the universe is not as it seems. According to this principle, the reality we experience is not the real world, but a projection, like an image projected onto a screen, a shadow cast from a deeper, more fundamental level of existence. What we see is a hologram, an illusion of sorts. Imagine that the universe as we know it is a vast and intricate hologram. Every object, every experience, every moment you encounter is a projection from a distant two-dimensional surface, encoded in a way that our minds interpret as three-dimensional reality. The world is not solid or permanent, it is a manifestation of something deeper, something beyond our direct perception. In this view, what we call reality is not the true fabric of the universe. Instead, it is a series of projections, information encoded on a distant surface, mapped in such a way that we perceive depth, texture, and solidity. The hologram we experience is a product of the interactions between the deeper two-dimensional surface and our consciousness. The holographic principle suggests that all the information that makes up the universe, everything we perceive, might be stored on this two-dimensional surface, much like the information of a holographic image. Our experience of depth, of three-dimensional space, is not the true structure of the universe, but a projection of this deeper reality. Consider how a hologram works. When light interacts with a special surface, it creates a three-dimensional image. The image appears solid, real, and tangible, even though the surface itself is flat and two-dimensional. In the same way, the universe we perceive might be a projection, an image created from information encoded on a distant hidden surface. This theory suggests that the universe is not made of the solid, tangible matter we experience. Instead, it is a projection of information, encoded in a way that gives us the illusion of a three-dimensional world. The objects we interact with, the space we occupy, are not the fundamental building blocks of reality, but projections of a deeper, hidden order. If the universe is a hologram, then the very nature of space and time may be illusions, reflections of a deeper, more fundamental structure. What we perceive as solid objects in continuous time may be the result of information encoded on a surface, just as a hologram's three-dimensional image is the result of two-dimensional information. This view challenges our understanding of reality. We tend to think of space and time as the fundamental structure of the universe, the framework within which everything exists. But if the holographic principle is true, then space and time themselves are not fundamental. They are merely projections, a way for us to experience the deeper underlying reality. In the context of this theory, gravity, matter, and even light may be projections, not fundamental forces in themselves. The interactions we experience in three dimensions might be the result of information encoded on a distant two-dimensional surface. What we perceive as forces acting upon us are simply effects of this holographic structure. The holographic principle also invites us to rethink the concept of the universe itself. If everything we experience is a projection, then what is the true nature of the universe? Perhaps it is not the vast, three-dimensional space we imagine it to be. Perhaps it is a two-dimensional surface, a boundary that holds the information that gives rise to the experience of depth and space. This perspective forces us to reconsider our place in the universe. If the reality we see is a hologram, a projection from a deeper level, then we are not interacting with the true universe at all. Instead, we are experiencing a filtered, encoded version of it, shaped by our senses and interpreted by our minds. The implications of the holographic principle extend beyond the nature of space and time. If the universe is a projection, then perhaps consciousness itself is not as we think. Maybe consciousness too is a projection, a result of information being processed and interpreted. The boundaries between the mind, reality, and the universe might be far more fluid than we can imagine. If the holographic principle holds, then our experience of reality might not be as real as we think. What we perceive as solid matter, time and space could simply be projections, the mind's interpretation of information encoded on a distant surface. The true nature of existence may be hidden from us, beyond the projection we call reality. This theory also challenges the way we understand knowledge. If all the information that constitutes the universe is encoded on a surface, then perhaps knowledge itself is not something we acquire from the world. Instead, it may be a process of interpreting the information that is already there, a process of decoding the projections of the deeper reality. The holographic principle opens up new possibilities for understanding the universe. It suggests that everything we experience, everything we know, might be an illusion, a reflection of something much more profound and intricate. It asks us to rethink the very nature of reality, of space, of time, and of ourselves. In the end, the idea of the universe as a hologram invites us to embrace the mystery of existence. What we perceive as reality may be nothing more than a projection, an image created from the deeper fabric of the universe. Reality is not what it seems, and the truth may lie hidden in the information encoded on a surface beyond our reach. You sit in silence, thinking about who you are. The thoughts you hold about yourself feel real, yet they are also constructed, shaped by the stories you tell. What if identity itself is nothing more than a narrative, a fiction we create to give meaning to our lives? This is the essence of the fictionalist view of identity. The fictionalist view suggests that our sense of self is not rooted in any essential fixed truth, but is a story we weave together to make sense of our existence. According to this view, identity is like a character in a novel, one that takes shape through the actions, thoughts, and experiences we assign to it. But what happens when we see ourselves as a story rather than as a stable being? In the fictionalist view, identity is not a discovery, it is an invention. The you that exists today is not something preordained or fixed, but something created in response to the events in your life. The narrative you construct about yourself is an interpretation of those events, shaped by your own perspectives and the meanings you attach to them. Each day, you add new chapters to the story of who you are, rewriting parts of the narrative with every experience, every thought, every encounter. The self is not a static entity, but a constantly evolving fiction, written in the present moment and shaped by the passage of time. You are the author of your own identity, yet the story is never finished. This view invites us to consider the role of language in shaping who we are. We speak of ourselves in the first person, using words to define our feelings, our goals, our history. But these words are not truths. They are fictions, created by us to make sense of our lives, to give shape to the vast, unspoken experience of being. The fictionalist view tells us that there is no essential I, there is only the story of I that we tell. The fictionalist view challenges us to let go of the search for an unchanging eternal self. There is no hidden essence waiting to be uncovered. There is only the narrative we construct. Who you are is not found by peeling back layers or digging into the past, but by recognizing the story you have told and continue to tell about yourself. But what does it mean to live as a story? To understand identity as a fiction is to embrace the idea that we are always in the process of becoming, always crafting the next chapter. In this view, the self is not fixed but open-ended. You are not defined by what you have been, but by what you choose to become, by the story you are willing to write next. The fictionalist perspective also asks us to reflect on the power of perspective. A story changes depending on who tells it, how it's told, and the context in which it's shared. In the same way, your sense of self can shift depending on the lens through which you view your own life. You are not one fixed identity, but a fluid narrative shaped by your perspective. If identity is a fiction, then what are we really? Are we just characters in a story, without substance or meaning? The fictionalist view does not deny the reality of our experiences, but it suggests that the meaning we attach to those experiences, the way we define ourselves, is something we create, not something inherently existing outside of us. Consider how your identity has changed over the years. Perhaps you once thought of yourself as shy and reserved, but now you embrace your outgoing nature. This shift is not the discovery of a hidden self, but the rewriting of a narrative, the creation of a new chapter in the ongoing story of who you are. The fictionalist view of identity also highlights the role of society in shaping our self-concept. We are not isolated storytellers. Our narratives are shaped by the interactions we have with others. The stories we tell about ourselves are influenced by the culture, the language, and the expectations that surround us. We are both the authors and the readers of our own identity. But if our identity is a story, how do we know when it is true? The fictionalist view tells us that truth in this context is not about finding an objective reality, but about the coherence of the narrative. A well-told story is one that makes sense within the context of the life you lead, one that aligns with your experiences, your values, and your relationships. This view also invites us to embrace the possibility of change. If identity is a fiction, then there is no need to hold on to a static version of yourself. You can rewrite your story, change your goals, shift your perspectives, and redefine who you are at any given moment. The fiction of selfhood is not limiting, it is liberating, offering endless opportunities for transformation. The fictionalist view also raises questions about memory. Our memories are the raw materials from which we construct our identities, but they are not objective records of the past. Memory is selective, fluid, and shaped by our present selves. What we remember is not necessarily what happened, but what we have chosen to include in the ongoing story of who we are. In embracing the fictionalist view, we may find a new freedom in understanding identity as something fluid and creative. Instead of seeking a definitive answer to the question, "Who am I?" we can allow ourselves to be the authors of our own stories, crafting a self that is not rigid, but ever evolving, ever adapting. This view also encourages us to let go of the pressure to find a single, unified self. Identity is not a problem to solve, but a story to tell, one that is constantly unfolding. You are not defined by one moment, one memory, one decision. You are a collection of moments, each contributing to the narrative of your life. Perhaps the greatest gift of the fictionalist view is that it allows us to experience life as a journey, not a destination. Identity is not something to be found, but something to be created, day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. In this sense, the story of who you are is never truly finished. It is always unfolding, always open to new possibilities, and so, as you drift into sleep, let go of the need to define yourself, to pin down who you are. Embrace the fluidity of identity, the possibility that you are always becoming, always changing. Your story is yours to write, and with each passing day, a new chapter begins. Your self is not fixed, but a tale that never ends. You sit quietly, lost in thought. The mind, it seems, is so often seen as something bound within the body, contained in the confines of your skull. But what if the mind is not so limited? What if it extends beyond you, into the world around you, shaping who you are in ways you cannot yet fully grasp? This is the extended mind thesis, a fascinating idea that suggests our cognitive processes do not reside solely in our brains, but are spread out into the world around us. The mind, according to this theory, is not confined to the body, but extends through our interactions with tools, objects, and even other people. In this view, you are not simply the sum of what is inside your mind, but the sum of your interactions with the world. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are not just a product of your brain, but are connected to the environment you live in. The notebook you carry, the smartphone in your hand, the conversations you have, all these are part of the extended mind, forming a bridge between you and the world. What if your mind is more connected to the world than you realize? This concept invites us to rethink how we define the self. If the mind extends beyond the body, then who you are is not just determined by what you think or feel within, but by how you interact with everything around you. Your identity is shaped not just by your inner world, but by the objects and relationships you engage with daily. The extended mind thesis challenges the traditional boundaries of the self. It suggests that we are not isolated beings with minds contained within us, but part of a larger system. The mind flows through tools, through people, through the environment itself, extending beyond our immediate perception of who we are and how we experience the world. Consider how you use a pencil to write your thoughts, a phone to record your memories, or a map to navigate your journey. In these simple acts, your mind is extending beyond your body. You are not just the thinker, you are the thinker with tools, with aids that shape and direct your thinking in profound ways. This idea invites us to consider that we are always interconnected with our surroundings. The tools we use, the people we interact with, the environments we inhabit, they all become extensions of our cognitive processes. Your mind is not just what is inside your head, but also what is around you, interacting with the world, shaping your thoughts, your perceptions, and your identity. In this sense, the extended mind thesis blurs the line between the internal and the external. What we often think of as separate, our minds and the world, are not as distinct as we might assume. The boundary between the two is fluid, intertwined, creating a shared space where the mind and the world are in constant interaction. Perhaps the most profound implication of this theory is the idea that identity is not something fixed, not something internal that we possess and protect. Instead, identity is something that exists in relation to the world, shaped by the tools, the experiences, and the people we encounter. Your identity is a process, always influenced by the external world, always interacting with what is around you. The extended mind thesis also raises the question of what it means to be you. If your mind extends beyond the body, then what happens when the tools you rely on change? If the smartphone you once used to remember things breaks or becomes obsolete, does your sense of self shift? What if the environments you inhabit change drastically? How does that alter your mind, your identity? Consider a memory. It might be something you recall from the past, something held deep within your mind. But in many cases, the memory is supported by external tools, photographs, journals, digital records that help shape and guide the recall. In this sense, memory is not just something inside your mind, but something you construct with the help of the world around you. This understanding of the extended mind also invites us to think about consciousness differently. What if consciousness is not just something that happens within the confines of our brain, but something that arises through our interactions with the world, through the use of external tools, through the connections we form with others? Our awareness of who we are, of our thoughts and actions, is shaped by the larger environment we are embedded in. In this light, identity becomes a dynamic, ever-evolving process shaped by the world around us. The self is not a static thing we possess, but a relationship we maintain with the tools, the environments, and the people that help shape our experiences. Your mind does not exist in isolation. It is always interacting, always flowing outward into the world. In this view, the self is not something fixed or confined to the body. It is a fluid entity, shaped by the ongoing interaction between the mind and the environment. The self exists not just within, but in the spaces we occupy, in the objects we interact with, and in the relationships we form. Your mind is always extended, always reaching outward. The extended mind thesis invites us to embrace a new understanding of what it means to be human. You are not just your thoughts, your feelings, or your memories. You are also the tools you use, the people you connect with, the spaces you inhabit. Your mind flows outward, creating a network of interconnected experiences that shape your identity. And so, when you consider the essence of who you are, remember that you are not an isolated mind, but a mind that extends into the world. Your identity is a dynamic, evolving process shaped by the interactions you have with everything around you. The boundaries of the self are not fixed. They are always flowing, always expanding into the world. You sit quietly, looking around at the world you know. The walls, the objects, the people, everything feels solid, real, and familiar. But what if this reality is not as it seems? What if your mind is simply running a simulation, a projection of something much larger, beyond your own awareness? This is the heart of the simulation theory of mind. Simulation theory suggests that everything you experience, everything you perceive, might not be real in the way you think it is. Instead, it could be a simulation, a model created by your mind to interpret and navigate the world. Your thoughts, your perceptions, your sense of self, what if they are just projections, simulations created by a deeper system? In this view, the mind is not a passive observer, but an active participant in creating the reality you experience. Rather than being a reflection of a fixed external world, your consciousness is a model, a simulation that makes sense of the raw data your senses receive. The you know might not be the true self, but an avatar within a much larger construct. Imagine for a moment that everything you experience, the feelings, the thoughts, the events, are all part of an elaborate simulation. Your mind runs a program that constructs reality in real time, based on the data it receives. The world, the people, even your sense of self, might simply be constructs within this grand simulation, created to help you navigate existence. This idea forces us to rethink the nature of consciousness and identity. If our mind is running a simulation, then our perception of reality is not an accurate representation of the world. It is, instead, a model, a set of probabilities and projections created to make sense of the world in a way that allows us to function within it. In simulation theory, identity is not something that exists independently, but is a construct within the simulation itself. You are not a fixed, isolated entity, but a character within a program, playing a role in a reality that is itself an illusion. The self you know is just an avatar, created by the system that runs your consciousness. This perspective challenges everything we know about reality and the self. If our minds are simply running a simulation, then who are we really? Are we the mind that creates the simulation, or are we merely a part of it? The boundaries of identity blur, and what we once thought of as a stable sense of self becomes a fleeting, malleable construct. The simulation theory of mind also suggests that our consciousness is limited by the parameters of the simulation itself. What we perceive as reality is only a small fraction of what actually exists. Our minds, constrained by the simulation, cannot perceive the true nature of the world outside it. We live within a model, a representation of something much larger. If this is true, then the self becomes even more elusive. You are not defined by a fixed set of characteristics, but by the simulation that runs in your mind. Your thoughts, your desires, your memories, everything you experience is a projection, a construction within the program. Your sense of self is not an inherent truth, but an artifact of the simulation. The beauty of simulation theory is that it frees us from the burden of a fixed, unchanging identity. If we are simply avatars in a simulation, then identity is not a destination, but a fluid experience. You can change, evolve, and adapt within the parameters of the simulation. The you know is always in flux, always subject to the shifting program of the mind. In this view, identity is not a singular, permanent thing. It is an experience, a story told by the simulation that runs in your mind. Each moment is a new set of experiences, a new configuration of data, and the self is simply the construct that emerges from this ever-changing flow of information. Simulation theory also invites us to question the nature of free will. If we are characters in a simulation, are we truly in control of our actions, or are they predetermined by the parameters of the simulation? Are we the authors of our own stories, or are we simply following a script written by a larger, unseen force? Consider the way you make decisions. When you choose something, is it truly your choice, or is it the result of the program running in your mind? Perhaps your sense of free will is simply another projection within the simulation, a construct designed to make you feel as if you are in control, even though your actions are guided by a deeper system. This understanding of identity also forces us to reflect on the nature of reality itself. If everything we experience is part of a simulation, then what is the real world beyond it? Are we living in a constructed reality, or is there something beyond our perceptions, something we cannot access because our minds are limited by the simulation we inhabit? The simulation theory of mind suggests that the world you know is not as it seems. It is a construct, a projection designed to help you make sense of existence. But this does not mean that your experiences are meaningless. They are real within the context of the simulation. The world you live in is real to you, even if it is an illusion within a larger system. In the end, the simulation theory asks us to embrace the fluidity of identity and the impermanence of reality. If the mind is running a simulation, then who you are is not fixed, but a dynamic process, an avatar moving through a world of projections. Your sense of self is not the truth of who you are, but a part of the illusion you navigate each day. And so, as you drift into sleep, consider the possibility that your sense of self is not as solid as you think. The world, your mind, and even your identity might be nothing more than a projection, a simulation of something far beyond your understanding. Perhaps, in the end, identity is simply a dream within a larger dream.